but many of his former associates do because they helped to write it, and some of them might take jobs in the next Republican administration. So if a Republican president returns to the White House, expect any policies that echo Project 2025 to be identical, toned down, or ramped up. This edition of The Inquiry was presented by me, Charmaine Cozier. The producer was Louise Clark, researcher Matt Tolson, editor Tara McDermott, and technical producer Nikki Edwards.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Mercy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We are live downtown on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. 3 minutes to 6 o'clock. The morning show's on until 8:37 AM. And if you need us on the morning commute for any reason, 788-3093. Just throwing that out early so you know where you can reach us. In the city today, hot and sticky again, high 28 in Winnipeg, and with Humidex, it's going to feel like 33. Grab the water. Good morning to the team. There's a big team on the other side of the glass this morning. Brad Lillies, hello. Chloe Friesen, hello. Chloe's directing the program and also will be covering the morning commute as well as weather on the air. And good morning to Sierra Sanders, who is teching the show this morning and behind the control board. And good morning to Marshall Hodgins, who's also in on our team today. Matt Humphreys is in too, and he's here with morning headlines. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning. The provincial government plans to allow municipalities to opt out of the Winnipeg metropolitan region, a move that could weaken or even scuttle an effort to standardize land use rules in and around the provincial capital. We'll hear more at 6:30. And researchers at the University of Manitoba are working with a Northern First Nation to develop vegetables with increased nutritional characteristics, and they may help combat health conditions like diabetes. More on that effort at the bottom of the hour.
Thank you, Matt Humphrey. Nice to see you.
And you, my friend.
All right, let's get into what's going on in the program this morning. The Premier is going to be on. There are a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, and yes, a lot of conspiracies around Plan 2050. And so CBC journalist Bartley Kiva sat down with Premier Wab Kinew to talk all about it. As you've been hearing in the news or likely know, this is the regional plan, as mentioned, that would help the Winnipeg and 17 surrounding municipalities better collaborate, or that's what it proposes to do. However, there are a lot of concerns, as I mentioned, and a lot of the meetings have been taken over by hundreds of people. So we will hear what Premier Wab Kinew has to say to Bartley Kivas in that feature interview coming up a little bit later in the show. In addition, in the first hour of the show, I don't know about you, but it feels like every time I open my phone, there's some kind of a text from someone asking me to text back. Often it's about money, and sometimes it's fraudulent. The Winnipeg Police Service has issued a warning about a rise in fraudulent phone calls, and we're going to hear more about that, but also specifically through a lens of how do you protect someone maybe that is vulnerable to this in your own family. So stay tuned. Right now, though, let's find out more on World Report.
Today on Q.
I'm Talia Schlanger, sitting in for Tom Power. Country singer Mackenzie Porter grew up in a family that ranched by day and played music by night near Medicine Hat, Alberta. She's co-hosting this year's Canadian Country Music Awards and will tell you about ranching and songwriting.
I'm thinking about those days, I'm thinking about a 98.
Q. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Time is running out. CN Rail, CPKC, and their union have until just after midnight tonight to reach a deal. If that does not happen, the country will be thrown into an unprecedented rail work stoppage. Some companies are already enlisting trucks to ship their goods. But as Paula Dehachik reports, there is a limit to how much trucks can move.
Already, we've had to move a lot of product that was going to be moved on rail to truck right away.
Sam Woods is president of Jory Logistics, a Calgary-based customs broker and freight forwarder. He says he's most concerned about ocean containers, which typically travel to and from port by rail.
If the strike does happen, then we'll just be forced to shift everything to truck, which will be kind of a mad dash to get everything on trucks.
Woods isn't alone. Stephen Laskowski with the Canadian Trucking Alliance says for months now, companies have been making similar plans.
What my members have seen since February, March is an adaptation by the shipping industry, who typically would move freight by rail and now shifting that to truck.
But there's a limit to how much the trucking industry can help in the event of a rail stoppage. John Corey with the Freight Management Association of Canada says certain products can't practically be moved long distances by truck.
Petroleum, agriculture, mining, potash, coal, there's no real alternative.
Plus, he says there just aren't enough trucks or drivers to fill a big gap in transportation.
I hope that people can find an alternative, but trucking is not going to be it.
As for Woods,
everyone doing this at once is going to be a giant issue.
He's used to supply chain problems and coming up with stopgap solutions. Paula Duhacek, CBC News, Calgary.
Russia says it has fended off the largest attack on its capital by Ukrainian drones. Russian social media channels are sharing videos of drones being destroyed by air defense systems. Defense officials say the military destroyed 45 drones overnight. 11 of them were reportedly targeting the Moscow region. The Ukrainian Air Force also says Russia launched nearly 70 drones at its territory overnight. An invigorated Democratic Party is gathering again today in Chicago. It is day 3 of the National Convention. Last night, Barack and Michelle Obama took jabs at Donald Trump over his past comments and crowd sizes, while encouraging voters to steer towards a kinder brand of politics. The CBC's Ithel Musa joins me now from Chicago. Ithel, what a night for a party that just a couple of weeks ago appeared to be flailing.
Indeed, the energy inside Chicago's United Center reached a whole new level last night. Kamala Harris wasn't there, but her presence was felt. The vice president was at a rally in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a crucial battleground state in the exact arena where Donald Trump accepted the Republican nomination last month. That rally was carried live on the Jumbotron in Chicago, allowing Harris to speak directly to 2 packed arenas at the same time. But the highlight of the evening was Michelle and Barack Obama, the former First Lady and President, urging Americans to get out and vote. The two also took digs at former President Donald Trump, who last month falsely told a group of Black journalists that immigrants were taking away Black jobs. Michelle Obama's retort last night ignited the audience.
His limited, narrow view of the world made him feel threatened by the existence of 2 hard-working, highly educated, successful people who happen to be Black. Who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those Black jobs?
What are we expecting tonight?
Kamala Harris's running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, will be giving the headline address at the convention. Walz wasn't widely known outside of Minnesota before Harris chose him. His speech tonight will be an opportunity for him to introduce himself to Americans. Walz is a former teacher and member of the U.S. Army National Guard. He also comes from rural America, and the hope among many Democrats is that he will help Harris win in 3 key Midwest states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Thank you, Ithel.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Ithel Musa in Chicago. Panama has started to deport people who have entered its territory illegally, and the United States is helping to pay for part of the cost. In July, the 2 countries signed an agreement to control what they call irregular migration. The U.S. is trying to slow the number of migrants crossing its border, its southern border. Freelance reporter Manuel Rueda has that story.
After years of being a pathway for illegal immigrants to the U.S., Panama is making good on a promise to try and stem the flow. Early on Tuesday, a group of 30 Colombians, handcuffed and shackled, were led onto a charter flight by Panamanian immigration officers. They recently crossed the treacherous Darien Gap and entered Panama without travel permits, making them eligible for deportation.
We
hope these flights become more regular, Panama's Vice Minister of Security, Luis Felipe Icaza, said in a press conference. More than 500,000 migrants from South America, Asia, and Africa passed through Panama on their way to the United States last year. The roadless and hilly rainforest on the southern edge of Panama, known as the Darien Gap, has become one of the world's most transited migration routes. For several years, U.S. officials have been looking at ways to discourage migrants from using it. In July, they signed a $6 million deal with Panama's new government that includes funding for deportation flights and programs that will train Panama's police to process migrants and identify those with criminal records. With around 1,000 people crossing each day, however, only a small percentage are likely to end up on deportation flights. Panama and the U.S. are hoping that the chances of being deported might discourage some migrants from taking this route. Manuel Rueda for CBC News, Bogotá.
Emergency workers walked through the wreckage of a bus crash in central Iran. At least 28 pilgrims from Pakistan were killed when the bus overturned and burst into flames. At least 23 others were injured. It happened in the province of Yazd. Officials say the bus was traveling through Iran to Iraq for a Shia Muslim ritual. Initial reports from Iranian traffic police say the brakes on the bus were defective. Authorities in Pakistan have charged a man with cyber terrorism. He's accused of spreading disinformation thought to have fueled riots across the UK. Those riots erupted after the stabbing attack that killed 3 young girls in Southport last month. An article was published on the website Channel 3 Now. It gave a false name for the suspected attacker and suggested he was an asylum seeker who arrived in the UK by boat. Broad anti-immigrant protests broke out across Britain. Police in Pakistan allege Farhan Asif runs that website. Researchers at the University of Manitoba are working with a northern First Nation to develop a smart vegetable, one that has characteristics to combat health conditions like diabetes. But the researchers are battling concerns about so-called fake food. As Karen Pauls tells us, convincing people to eat unfamiliar vegetables can be a challenge.
So these are broccoli sprouts.
Operations Manager Stephanie Cook is showing off the Opaskwayak Cree Nation's Smart Farm, a futuristic-looking lab in a remote northern Manitoba community.
We grew up to day 10.
And there's no soil?
No.
LED lights mimic sunshine. Artificial intelligence controls temperature, moisture, carbon dioxide, and nutrient levels.
Getting the care that it would need in order to be an optimum product.
Researchers have found activating specific compounds with health benefits, like potassium and manganese, are making these veggies up to 11 times more nutritious than grocery store vegetables. Mi Young Soo teaches nutritional sciences at the University of Manitoba.
They can consume much less, but they still same benefits.
Almost half of the adult population in the Opaskwayak Cree Nation lives with type 2 diabetes. Leaders say there's an average of 3 diabetes-related deaths every month. At the same time, Cook says part of the challenge is encouraging people to eat these smart vegetables.
People were like, oh, it's artificial, it's fake food.
So, food scientists developed recipes and brought a meal to the local shopping mall.
Would you like to try some chili with kale?
Excellent.
Have you ever eaten kale before?
I don't even know what that is.
The goal is to educate people on how smart veggies contribute to a healthy diet and ultimately save lives. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Opaskwayak Cree Nation, Manitoba.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Great to hear a story on national news about our province. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're listening, and we are live from downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM. Also 9:90 a.m. on the app or on YouTube this morning. Thanks for joining us. In the city of Winnipeg, we're a little bit milder for a start than we were yesterday. We're at 17 degrees. Chloe Friesen with our full forecast in just a moment to plug you into your Wednesday. Coming up this hour on the program, we have a new school year just around the corner. What are you going to do as those daily routines have to kick back in and you've been on summertime time? Stay tuned. We'll have a discussion about it. In addition, at 10 to 7, Statistics Canada released its Consumer Price Index for July, showing the slowest inflation increase in over 3 years. What does that actually mean for your wallet? We will break that down. But we begin this morning in a moment talking about the Winnipeg Police Service issuing warnings about rise in fraudulent phone calls. And the focus we're going to take today is how you protect not only yourself, but those in your family or your circle that may be particularly vulnerable to what is becoming just increasingly sophisticated way of really trying to take advantage of folks. So stay tuned for that. Right now, we have some news to talk about. And with our daily headlines from Manitoba, here's Matt Humphrey.
Good morning. Premier Wab Kinew says his government will introduce legislation this fall he's calling a freedom bill. The NDP plans to allow municipalities to opt out of the Winnipeg metropolitan region. This means they can also drop out of a new regional planning framework. At the bottom of the hour, we'll hear what that could mean for the future of municipal development. And a band councillor with Norway House Cree Nation says the community is working on an animal control bylaw following a 9-year-old girl being badly injured last Thursday in a dog mauling. Heavenly Monius was bitten on her cheek, chest, and arm. More news at 6:30.
All right, thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
Let's get into the forecast. As I mentioned, Chloe Friesen is in this morning with the details. Good morning.
Good morning. Partly cloudy right now here in Winnipeg. It's 17 degrees at the Forks. Today we're looking at a mix of sun and cloud. Winds south 30, gusting to 50, so a bit breezy. High of 28, but as Marcy mentioned, with the humidex feeling like 33, so pretty warm out there. Right now in Brandon, 16 degrees, partly cloudy. Dauphin, clear, 20 degrees at the moment. And in Thompson, mainly clear and 20 degrees. Thompson, you are currently have the risk of a severe thunderstorm this morning, so you might see some precipitation, maybe some thunder and lightning. When it comes to the commute, it's 6 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, so not too much going on out there. But of course, if something does get in your way, or if there's maybe a construction spot that's really slowing you down, you can let us know by calling 204-788-3093.
So let me ask you this, Chloe, before you go. Let me ask you this. So I am wondering, we're going to do this fraud interview in just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you've noticed it, like more texts, more, people reaching out, and you're wondering, is this legit or not? Like when you look at your phone and you get this?
Definitely. And I feel like I'm pretty good at figuring out when it is like a scam text, but lately I've noticed a specific type where it's someone saying like, "Hey Brad, it's
so and
so."
Yeah.
And then you go, "Wait, no, I'm not this person. This is a wrong number." And so you text back, "Oh, sorry, like wrong number." And then they try to keep the conversation going.
What do you look for? You said you're usually pretty good at knowing if it right away is a scam. What do you look for in those?
Usually if it's something from like Amazon or a bank or like about a package delivery, but the number is a little iffy, and I know I didn't order something on Amazon, or
then
it's not
obvious,
and it's not a bank I use. Then it's pretty obvious. But yeah, they're getting a little bit more.
I feel like
tricky.
I feel like I'm getting them almost daily. At any rate,
all the time. Yeah.
In a moment, we're going to have that conversation. We're going to hear more about how to protect your loved ones. So this whole conversation about being concerned about fraud grew out of, as I mentioned, the Winnipeg Police Service actually issuing a warning now about a number of fraudulent phone calls in this case. Now, the calls are claiming to be coming from financial institutions. They do give warnings about unauthorized transactions or compromised bank accounts. You are then asked, the victims then asked, to transfer money to secure the account. That money is stolen by the suspect. Now, what do you do to protect yourself, a family member, or anyone in your circle from fraud, especially the most vulnerable folks? Laura Tamblin-Watts is CEO of CanAge, and CBC's Emily Brass talked to her about this on Up to Speed.
So we often think about older adults when we talk about fraud like this. Why are they more at risk of falling victim to fraud?
Well, there's a couple of different pieces to that. The first is most older adults were taught to be polite to people who call them on the phone. For that matter, that extends usually to knocks on the doors or emails as well. And so there's a cultural norm that many older people have that in some ways makes them a little bit more open to fraudsters getting the hooks in. The second is if you have any degree of mental capacity issues, so this might be like a really early sign of dementia, one of the things that happens in your brain is you actually start to reduce your level of skepticism. They call it the credulity aspect. And so many older people will believe things a little bit more easily if they have a mental capacity issue. And lastly, sometimes they have more time on their hand, they're more likely to answer the phone.
Yeah, and give people their time. So, how can you talk about fraud with an older adult or a family member without demeaning their intelligence or independence?
Really important that when we're having these conversations, we don't make it about you being an older person necessarily, but just that it happens to all of us. In fact, we can talk about a story that you heard on the CBC or something that happened to you. If we are normalizing the fact that frauds and scams are happening everywhere, we can start those conversations. That reduces people's risk, but it also allows us together as a family to make some plans, both to flag what could be a fraud and what to do if you get caught.
Okay, so what are some simple things you can do to protect yourself from fraud?
One of the easiest things you can do is have a family policy that you don't respond to the phone calls, and for that matter, the emails, the text messages, or even people at the door right away. And then what I often say is, print out all of the names of the types of things that you might receive, whether it's your bank or the CRA or your faith community or something like that. Print out their websites and their telephone numbers and put them, maybe in big font for those of us whose eyes are getting a little bit older too, on the fridge. And so instead of saying, thank you, I'm going to engage with you right now, you say, no, I'm going to, thanks very much. I'll take this information and I'm going to reach out directly.
Yeah. So what steps might you take if you think your family member has already been a victim of fraud?
The reality is we've all probably been victims of fraud. Some we don't even know. And so again, that first piece is to normalize it. The second is to kind of get ready for some of those types of frauds, those red flags. The grandparent scam is one people talk about, and it is only getting more and more sophisticated with AI. So it used to be, for instance, that, you heard someone mumbling and you said, grandma, and you said, oh, is that you? And then you fill in the blank and off you go. But now actually they're synthesizing the voice of your grandchild and increasingly synthesizing the face of your grandchild too. So we need to keep up to date with what those frauds and scams are. Another easy way, however, besides just keeping up to date, is making sure that you've got some protocols and processes in place. So if it's someone on the other end of the phone and they're pretending to be someone that you know, then have a code word. What we don't want to do, however, is scare people to the point that they stop engaging with anyone. Right. And that's one of the challenges. You don't want to make it so frightening that they don't then use email, or so terrifying that they don't answer the phone, because we don't want people to be retracting. We want them to feel more confident. One of the things I often do is say, monthly, let's have a little check-in and let's have a look at the phone. Let's have a look at the email. And it doesn't need to be about you as a younger person telling your parents what to do, because, that's not going to go over so well. But rather, we can all kind of have a little bit of a security check-in or a little bit of a laugh. And at those points, do password resets as well, not so complicated, where it is possible for frauds and scams to be weeded out by things like biometrics. Updating some of the technology is helpful. So very useful if you have facial recognition, very useful if your parent gets their finger on that touch point pad, because it makes it more secure to them and they don't have those password reset problems that we all experience. I mean, the reality is we can't download this always to people. These are system problems. In fact, the FBI in the US is declaring frauds and scams a national security risk. And I think Canada needs to be thinking about it that way as well, because it is intrusion. One of the great things that Australia did recently is it required every company to show on their telecom, so that's your cell phone, your mobile, your internet, if something was calling from out of country, and scam artists are often calling from out of country. So even just showing out of country call and likely spam and those types of things reduced fraud, stranger fraud in Australia by 75% in about 1 year. So we could be getting some of our telecoms and regulatory agencies to push companies to put these small things in place, so it's not always our fault in trying to deal with them.
So that's a conversation that CBC's Emily Brass had yesterday on Up to Speed with Laura Tamblin-Watts, the CEO of CanAge, all about fraud, as the Winnipeg Police Service has now issued warnings about an increasing number of fraudulent calls.
The CBC News app delivers the answers you want to know and need to know.
What an extraordinary scene.
The breaking stories that shape your world. Reporting from the scene onto your screens.
Dropping the 8 now. We're just approaching Gaza.
Your source for mobile news. Delivered when you want, where you want.
This situation has changed very quickly.
The CBC News app. Download for free.
6:21 a.m., partly cloudy in Winnipeg, 17 degrees. It's going to be sticky and windy today. Winds will gust up to 50 from the south. Our high is 28 with humidex 33 in the city. Now, I want to mention that one of the biggest stories that we're watching all across this country is what could be developing by tomorrow. We're going to see, that's the deadline, midnight tonight, the railway strike. And so this would be unprecedented across Canada. And obviously, we are monitoring the possible work stoppage at the two main railways in Canada. And Christine Ramlakan's going to be in to talk about the implications and the preparations and what people are feeling and thinking about today in advance of this deadline looming. So she's going to join us with business news right after 6:30. So stay tuned for that. Next, though, there's another thing looming. 2 weeks from today, the first day of school in Winnipeg's largest division, September 4th. In fact, some other institutions like Red River College go back on Monday for classes. And as this new school year approaches, getting kids back to a regular routine, if you have the younger set in your house, can be a bit of a challenge. Late summer nights can make it tough for them to adjust to early mornings, the alarms, the school schedules, the family fights. Get up, it's time. For some ideas about how to make the transition smoother, we have Rebecca Robillard with us. She's a scientist at the University of Ottawa's Institute of Mental Health Research at the Royal, and she's co-chair of the Canadian Sleep Research Consortium. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how do you make the transition easier? Are there just some simple tips that parents can use?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the first one is if we can afford trying to make the switch progressively. So rather than making an abrupt shift when school starts, we can move bed and wake times by 15 minutes each day until we reach the new schedule beforehand. And to make this process easier, we can also encourage our kids to avoid smartphones, computers, and video games at least 1 hour before bedtime, because the light that is emitted from these devices make it harder for us to, get our body prepared for sleep. It suppresses our sleep hormones, for example. Also, we can work with our child to create a bedtime routine that's relaxing, that they enjoy, just to get in the right mind space before bedtime. And in the morning, perhaps most importantly, we can get our child as much light as possible. We know that morning light is excellent to switch our body's internal clock and to earlier times and to make it easier to fall asleep and wake up earlier. Once we reach the right time, the target time, another critical point is to maintain a stable sleep schedule every day, including the weekends if we can, to avoid the Monday grumpies and the big shift all of a sudden on Mondays.
What are some of the common mistakes that people might make while they're trying to do what you're talking about, adjusting the kids to a new routine?
Yeah, I guess one common one is forcing earlier bedtimes all of a sudden. So as I was saying, the biological clock has probably adjusted to lighter times during the summer. So the body of your child is not ready to actually achieve sleep if you force them to go to bed too early. And that kind of can create some performance anxiety, some sleep anxiety, as the kid is kind of laying in bed and really trying their best to fall asleep, but not being able to. And we know that this is one of the ways through which conditions like chronic insomnia can develop in the long run. So something to be kind of careful about. Another trap is encouraging naps during the daytime, especially, I'm not talking here about, the younger ones that still do need to nap, but for older kids and teenagers, naps can break down the natural buildup of sleep pressure that will actually help them fall asleep the next evening. Another thing is letting major shifts happen between weekdays and weekends.
You've alluded a couple of times here, Rebecca, to the natural clock that a young person might have. Just remind us some of those natural clocks, like how much sleep a teenager needs versus a 10-year-old, for example.
Yeah, good question. So, school-age children would need something to 10 to 12 hours of sleep. When we move on to teenagers, they might need from 8 to 10 hours of sleep still. So our teenagers often get sleep deprived because their natural biological rhythm makes it harder for them to fall asleep early. And I think but they still have to wake up early to get to school, right? So I guess that's also something to kind of keep in mind as parents. It's not just because they want to be belligerent or, kind of rebel. Their body is set to go to bed later and wake up later as well. So I guess we need to kind of be maybe a little bit more patient and understanding, because it is like the equivalent in some cases where they have to get up really early to take their bus and go to school. It is the equivalent if you and I were to kind of wake up at, 3 to 4 a.m. in the morning and be expected to perform our best. I'm realizing that I'm talking to a radio.
I was just going to say, I get up at 4 in the morning and try to perform my best for 20 years. I'm just kidding, though. I know it's not the norm.
But for us mortals, it is a kind of a big challenge. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're thinking about your teenagers. It's not just out of bad will is my main message.
And by the way, you're performing just fine this early morning. We appreciate you. I want to ask you a deeper question here, though, because we're talking about, adjusting to the fall and sleep schedules and school starting. But if you have trouble with sleep, or if your child has trouble with sleep, that can actually sometimes be an indicator of a deeper issue, whether it's a physical issue or a mental issue, right? You kind of even alluded to sort of looking at the ceiling and worrying about getting to sleep. That anxiety could creep in. Insomnia, you mentioned, could begin. When should someone start becoming concerned about that if their child is having or teen is having a trouble with the sleep adjustment, that actually it is a sign that something bigger is going on?
Yeah, that's a critical question. So if after several weeks your child still has not adjusted or still has difficulties falling or staying asleep at least 3 times a week, if they feel tired, they feel irritable, or they struggle with their thinking skills during the daytime, these might all be signs that, something's going on. There's also, aside from the kind of the classical signs of insomnia, there's a lot of different sleep disorders that could be underlying things like sleep apnea. People often don't realize that we see that in children sometimes as well. And so if your child is feeling, for example, abnormally sleepy during the day, despite the fact that they're getting enough sleep at night, this could be an indication that something's going on in their sleep. There's also just plain disruptions of the circadian clock, the biological clock, that could drive sleep disturbances as well. So I guess consulting healthcare professionals in those cases is indicated. And I just want to note that the first-line treatment for insomnia does not involve medications. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and it's often delivered by psychologists. So there's a lot of different healthcare professionals that can help with sleep. And there's more information about some resources for sleep on our website. So that's researchsleep.ca. And that includes some web-based sleep interventions that were designed by our Canadian sleep experts, some that were designed specifically for children, for youth, and also for adults.
Thank you for leaving us with the resources and all the information. Appreciate the conversation today, as mentioned. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a good day.
You too. That's Rebecca Robillard. She's scientist at the University of Ottawa's Institute of Mental Health Research at the Royal, and she is also co-chair of the Canadian Sleep Research Consortium.
Hey everyone, it's Dr. Raj Bardwaj here. It's back to school time, and that means another episode of our Kids Questions column. So if you're a kid, you're getting back to school, if you have any health or medical questions for me, send them on in, and I will see how many I can answer next week.
So take a shot, kids. If you're listening, or parents, if you're up listening and you say, I bet my child has a question, send it into Dr. Bardwaj. Any medical questions he will handle and try to see how many he can answer. And so please get them into the show for next week. Here's how you do that. You can email us at radio893@cbc.ca with your questions for Dr. Bardwaj, kids. radio893@cbc.ca. Or you can call our listener line. And we'd love it if you do that. Then we can play your call for Dr. Bardwaj. 788-3205. The deadline, however, is tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So 788-3205 for kid questions for our medical column. 17 in Winnipeg. The commute's going fine. Business news is straight ahead right after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. At 6:30, it's clear and 21 degrees in Norway House, Cree Nation, 17 degrees and mainly clear over downtown Winnipeg. Good morning. I'm Matt Humphrey. Norway House Cree Nation is trying to find the dogs involved in attacking a little girl. 9-year-old Heavenly Monius was bitten last Thursday on her cheek, chest, and arm. She was medevaced to Winnipeg and is recovering in hospital. Dion Clark is a counselor in the community. He says as many as 10 dogs may have been involved in the attack.
And even for the dogs that were involved with this incident, we don't know who the dog owners are. I've put it on Facebook trying to find out who the dog owners are, and nobody's sharing that information. And when we went around to try to find the dogs, all of a sudden there's no dogs around.
Clark says the community's been working on a new animal control bylaw. The new rules may require pet owners to register their animals and keep them on leashes or face fines. Manitoba's NDP government plans to allow municipalities to opt out of the Winnipeg region and no longer take part in a new regional planning framework called Plan 2050. No fewer than 5 of the municipalities around the city wanted the province to change or scrap that plan. Canoe says the former progressive conservative government imposed the plan upon them. He says his government will introduce legislation this fall making involvement voluntary.
Basically, this is something that was forced by Pallister and Stephenson. This is a Pallister-Stephenson special. So we're going to bring freedom back to the equation.
The current PC opposition wanted the NDP government to delay the plan. Winnipeg's mayor says more coordination is still in need to prevent a patchwork of rules across the capital region. This existing hodgepodge, he says, is bad for business. The University of Manitoba is suing its former law dean for nearly $700,000 in unauthorized spending. The lawsuit, filed in Manitoba's Court of King's Bench last week, said Jonathan Blackbranch misspent funds on professional development courses, members-only clubs, and personal expenses between 2016 and 2020. Blackbranch was disbarred from the Manitoba Law Society in February. Multiple previous attempts by CBC to contact Blackbranch have been unsuccessful, and none of the allegations have been proven in court. Researchers at the University of Manitoba are working with a Northern First Nation to develop a smart vegetable, one with the characteristics to combat health conditions like diabetes. But they're also battling unfamiliarity with the vegetable and concerns about so-called fake food. Karen Pauls explains.
Stephanie Cook is showing off Opaskwayak Cree Nation's Smart Farm.
So these are broccoli sprouts. These are
LED lights mimic sunshine. Artificial intelligence controls temperature, moisture, carbon dioxide, and nutrient levels.
And there's no soil.
No.
Researchers have now found a way to make those veggies up to 11 times more nutritious than grocery store produce. Mi Young Soo teaches nutritional sciences at the University of Manitoba.
They can consume much less, but they still same benefits.
Almost half of OCN's adult population lives with type 2 diabetes. Leaders say there's an average of 3 diabetes-related deaths every month. But Cook says it's been a challenge to convince people to eat the veggies.
People were like, oh, it's artificial, it's fake food.
So food scientists developed recipes, cooked them, and brought a meal to the local shopping mall.
Would you like to try some chili with kale?
Kale, first time trying that. It's great.
Do you think you might cook with this more often? Yes, for sure.
The goal is to educate people on how these smart veggies can contribute to a healthy diet and ultimately save lives. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Opaskwayak Cree Nation, Manitoba.
And finally, Kenora's cat shelter is asking for help as it struggles with overcrowding. The shelter declared a state of emergency on Sunday, saying it has nearly 120 cats in shelter or with fosters and more than 80 more cats on a waiting list. Lisa Lyle is the shelter's volunteer coordinator. She's with the board, and she says this summer has been very challenging.
We have been at max capacity literally, close to the time that I started volunteering there, which was about a year ago. But it has gotten extremely bad over the summer, and we have a lack of volunteers and a lack of funding and no room at the inn.
Lyle says the shelter's in need of donations, volunteers, and fosters. The shelter is having an open house on August 31st, which will have a barbecue, a fundraising barbecue, and a book sale, and a chance for people to meet and socialize with all the cats. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
Chloe Friesen is in. It's time for our regional forecast from CBC. What are we seeing today, Chloe?
Yeah, we're seeing similar weather to for from yesterday with that humidity, a little bit of that wind. So it's nothing like a good hot wind blowing at you here in Winnipeg. Right now at the Forks at 17 degrees, mostly cloudy. We are looking at a mix of sun and cloud, winds south 30, gusting to 50, a high of 28, feeling like 33 with that humidex. Tomorrow here in Winnipeg, cloudy sky, showers beginning earlier in the morning. The risk of a thunderstorm, winds south 30, gusting to 50, a high of 25, feeling like 32. So we could see some thunderstorms tomorrow in Winnipeg. Heading to Brandon, 16 degrees right now, partly cloudy. Looking at a mix of sun and cloud this morning, 30% chance of showers this afternoon. The risk of a thunderstorm in Brandon as well. Wind southeast 20, gusting to 40, and a high of 27. Similar weather in Dauphin and Thompson. In Dauphin, cloudy, 60% chance of showers this morning and early this afternoon with, again, the risk of a thunderstorm. A high of 27, feeling like 35 with that humidex. In Thompson, today, mainly cloudy with a 60% chance of showers or thunderstorms, with the risk of a severe thunderstorm this morning, actually. Local smoke, high of 28 with the humidex feeling like 33. Right now in Thompson, I'm not seeing any thunderstorms. Mainly clear at the moment, 20 degrees. But that risk is there. When it comes to the commute, not too busy out there at all. If you do find something that is slowing you down, maybe there's a spot of construction that's really been getting in your way and slowing you down, you can call us and let us know. That number is 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Chloe. It is at 6:37 a.m. on the nose on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and it's time for the Business Report with Christy Ramlakan, who joins us via Zoom. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Marcy.
So a lot of stress today. There's a big deadline looming over this entire country. Obviously, you're monitoring the possible work stoppage at Canada's two main railways. This will be unprecedented. What do we understand about today and set this up for us?
Yeah, that's right. So Canadian National Railway and Canadian Pacific Kansas City say they will start locking out workers early tomorrow if they cannot reach a deal. And the union also says it is ready to call a strike. So the union wants better wages and benefits, including provisions for fatigue management and better crew scheduling. And, the rail lines are part of a massive part of the economy. So they move about $1 billion a day worth of goods. So, if they shut down, it's going to be affecting a lot of things, including supply chains.
Yeah, yesterday in the show, we had a conversation about obviously the prairies and agriculture and how grain is moved, and that we're hearing on World Report, and as we understand, there's not a lot of alternatives, and you can't move everything by truck, as you said. So, I mean, it's going to be really challenging. We're doing a series of conversations. So Radio Noon today is going to have further coverage, by the way. I just want to flag that for folks. All right. Meantime, there's another story here about food delivery service. Skip the Dishes we're talking about. They're downsizing. Why? What are they doing?
Yeah, so about 800 Canadian workers are being laid off by Skip the Dishes and its parent company. So this will affect about 100 workers with Skip the Dishes and 700 people based out of Canada who work for its owner, JustEatTakeaway.com. Now, the CEO, Paul Burns, wrote on LinkedIn that the company took measures necessary to ensure it has the right resources and structure to drive sustainable growth. And he says a more focused approach will also ensure the company provides enhanced offerings to customers. Now, the business has spent years navigating a new ownership structure. Of course, as we know, Skip the Dishes has been around since 2012 and had its headquarters in Winnipeg. It was then acquired in 2016 for $110 million by Just Eat, which then merged with Takeaway.com in 2020 during the pandemic. Now, while lockdowns were seen as a boon for food delivery services, as measures lifted and inflation and interest rates soared, that's weighed on consumer spending. So for more on this, here's Thomas Sasso, who is an assistant professor at the University of Guelph.
It's an indication that perhaps there's some greater difficulties ahead for the organization and for the type of work that they're doing. A lot of organizations that rely on gig work have not necessarily built the strong human resource systems that are needed to create that sustainable growth and create a vision where it supports employees and their rights.
And Skip the Dishes also laid off about 350 workers based in Winnipeg, most of whom worked in remote contact center roles in 2022.
And you, before we look at markets this morning, I understand, Crystal, have an update on something that we talked about just the other day. This is about Disney.
Yes, so it is no longer asking a Florida court to dismiss a wrongful death lawsuit on the grounds that the victim's family had signed up for its streaming service, Disney+. So that request from the company had drawn swift backlash when it became public. And the entertainment giant says it's going to waive its arbitration rights and allow the suit. The case is being brought by the husband of a doctor who had a fatal allergic reaction after eating at a restaurant in Disney Springs. And Disney had previously argued that the husband could not sue the company because he had agreed to settle any lawsuits against the company out of court when he signed up for a 1-month trial subscription to Disney Plus back in 2019. And his lawyer had argued that it was absurd to believe that the more than 150 million subscribers to Disney Plus have waived all rights to sue the company because of language buried in fine print.
What are the markets telling us then this morning?
In Europe, markets are higher. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, markets are mostly lower after a Wall Street rally falters. So Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all down. Oil is up 4 cents to $73.21 US per barrel. Gold is down $240 to $2,548 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.06 of a cent to 73.5 cents US.
Now, we usually end with markets, but I actually want to end with one more thing that you have to talk about this morning, because I've never heard of this. So I have heard of quiet luxury before, and then loud budgeting, I think, was a trend for a while. But there's something new.
Yes, under consumption core. So people on social media are showing off their reused jars, patched clothes, and dish rags made from old t-shirts. So the trend shows users boasting about how they're continuing to use things and repurpose other items instead of buying new things as they save money. So it's kind of a rebrand of minimalism and reflects the current economic conditions and high jobless rate that are affecting young people in particular. So the unemployment rate has been steadily rising as high interest rates slow the economy down. But some say the underconsumption trend should actually just be viewed as normal consumption because the overconsumption we often see online is from influencers who are promoting products. And more people are realizing that they don't need to spend money on items that they won't be used over time.
My Dito and Baba would be proud.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
That is Crystal Lee Ramlicam with our business news on CBC. 6:43 a.m. Now, still staying with talking about finances. In a couple of moments from now, we're going to talk about Statistics Canada. This week, as you might know, releasing its consumer price index for July. What it showed is the slowest inflation rate increase in over 3 years, since 2021. But what does that actually mean for your wallet? We always ask these questions and get some analysis after the new numbers come out. So we'll have that conversation in a few minutes. Right now, though, is it conversations in the office that annoy you? Is it sounds? Is it someone humming or talking to themselves and you're trying to focus? Maybe you're trying to do something serious and everyone's laughing and going for lunch and you want to scream or pull your hair out. These could be examples of annoying coworkers. A workplace, after all, is a microcosm of competing personalities and working styles. And like any ecosystem, they come with pests. According to a new anonymous online survey by cover letter and resume builder Kick Resume, about 85% of people say that they've had to deal with someone they describe as an annoying coworker. Mark Harrison is a CBC business columnist as well, just like Crystal Lee. But this morning, we have a bit of what he has to say about the more annoying coworker types that were identified in this survey.
There's the complainer, there's the space invader, there's the micromanager, but one of the biggest ones is the person who steals credit. And then the other one, which is interesting and maybe not as commonplace, but also a thief, is the lunch thief. You know, you got one group who are stealing credit, and other people are after your ham and cheese. The data said 85% of people feel they've been around an annoying coworker. And about 60% of people say it actually impacts their productivity. So it impacts morale, it becomes a distraction. You know, one of the things that people talk about is that martyr syndrome, and everybody has somebody in their organization who's the martyr. They've got more work to do than anybody else. It's not a super motivating environment to hear this person go on and on and on about how busy they are. I think, you know, as an organization, you want to encourage people to deal with it. Experts say you should look at things like self-management. So you wake up in the morning, I've got a meeting with Mark Harrison, I got to spend 90 minutes with that guy. Think about, hey, it's him, not me. How am I going to deal with him? You know, not take it personally. But there's other things, right? Dealing with it directly, going to HR. And it's even more complex now in this sort of boundaryless hybrid, whatever sort of work structure you want to talk about, where now the annoying traits are coming through in Slack communication, in, you know, people multitasking. But those things have come in. And then the other thing that's happened is for younger cohorts who haven't necessarily had the opportunity to learn the office norms, they're actually the most annoyed. And they're annoyed by a whole bunch of things, which might just come down to the simple fact they're just not used to it. I think there are ways to address them both on a, you know, kind of a system-wide basis and an individual basis. So one of the things that at all our little companies is we utilize a process called EOS. EOS has a thing called level 10 meetings and teaches you how to have a great meeting. So I think there's that systemic level. And then I think on a mentorship level, I think organizations that have great mentorship programs, just getting that feedback from somebody. So sometimes it's just, you know, guidance, but I do think as we go through this new type of culture in terms of working, there's new rules.
That's Mark Harrison, CBC business columnist based in Toronto, talking about annoying coworkers and the different types. Maybe you found that you were the annoying coworker from listening to that. I had a couple humble moments myself. If you're brave enough, let us know what annoys you in the office. No names, please. Let's be nice. But 788-3205 if you want to call us this morning. It is 13 minutes to 7 o'clock on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcuso with my not annoying coworkers, Brad Lillies, Chloe Friesen, Marshall Hodgins, as well as Sierra Sanders behind the glass. Matt Humphrey is in our newsroom this morning, and he'll be back with headlines at the top of the clock. For news anytime, cbc.ca/Manitoba. And in national news this morning, stay tuned. We'll hear more about the Obamas who spoke at the National Democratic Convention down south yesterday. A lot of people staying up late to watch those speeches. So stay tuned for that. Right now we have a bit of music, local music from Tyler Del Pino. Tune's called Thank You for Loving Me.
We've had a good run and we ain't done yet. I feel like we both won when we placed our bets. Now whoever thought one drink could turn into the next few years of life. In a Camry riding beside me, tracing those highway lines. Never had much use for praying, knowing most prayers go unheard. Didn't thank the gods for sending me an angel down to earth. 7 hearts like mine ain't easy, but you back the way it beats every day. I'm amazed I get to love you, so thank you for loving me. First time in Chicago, we heard shots that shook the sky. I glued my hand to yours, held on tight, thinking this is how we're gonna die. We drove up to Minnesota and slept in that haunted house. I knew I loved you right then and there, even though we were both busy freaking out. Never had much use for praying, knowing most prayers go unheard. Didn't thank the gods for sending me an angel down to earth. 7 hearts like mine ain't easy, but you back the way it beats every day. I'm amazed I get to love you, so thank you for loving me. We're watching the time fly, 'cause you
Tyler Del Pino, and thank you for loving me. You know, it's a local artist when they refer to a road trip and they've gone to Chicago and Minnesota. I could see myself on that trip with them. It's 9 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and next in the show, let's talk money. Canada's annual inflation rate, as we've been talking, telling you and sharing, it fell to 2.5% in July. Those stats coming out this week. That's the slowest pace in 3 years. And that is the latest calculation of the Consumer Price Index from Statistics Canada. Now, despite the cooling, essentials like rent, groceries, and mortgages will still become more expensive year over year. Clay Jarvis is here to talk about the impact on you and your wallet and how to plan and how to look ahead. He's lead writer and spokesperson at NerdWallet Canada. That's a company that provides information to educate users to make financial decisions. Good morning.
Morning, Marcy.
Help us save money. Where do you start? Do you start with paying down debt? Do you save? Like, what do you do when everything is so expensive right now?
Well, I'm a huge proponent of paying off your high-interest debt as soon as possible because if that debt's allowed to just sit around and generate interest, all it really does is eat into your future savings anyways, right? But it's a tough choice because putting $1,000 into a savings account, for example, feels really good. And it probably feels a lot better than paying $1,000 off of a $5,000 credit card balance because you still see that $4,000 staring back at you. But, you know, when you pay off that $1,000, it doesn't just get your balance closer to zero. It also reduces the amount of interest you're going to have to pay. And if you can reduce your interest charges each month, well, that's more money for essentials or more money you can use to pay off your debt even further or more money to set aside as savings.
The cost of rents and mortgages continue to climb. Now, we know it's a less rapid rate, as I alluded to, but how will that change the way that Canadians might plan for the future when they think about, you know, their biggest expenses, which is one of them is housing?
Yeah, it's huge. Rent and mortgage interest rates have a huge effect on people's ability to plan for the long term. You know, for renters, rising rents makes it harder for them to save. Whether it's an emergency fund, a down payment for a house, or other investments. You know, you think about it, if a person is paying $2,500 a month in rent today, whereas they might have been paying $2,000 3 years ago, well, that's $6,000 less a year that person has to work with. And that's an enormous amount of money for most people. And the opportunity cost there is almost sickening to think about. And with mortgage rates, as long as mortgage rates stay high, it's going to keep home buyers from qualifying for the mortgages they need. And so if a person's long-term financial plan involves affording a home, that plan may have to be delayed unless they can afford a really big down payment to bring their mortgage principal down. And that's really something not a lot of people can do. They've eroded their savings over the last few years, so it's really hard to come up with extra cash.
Inflation's finally slowing down, but I understand that you really want people to think about it, to not get too excited about it, that you feel that people should understand, in your view, they're not out of the woods. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. I mean, we see these headline numbers and inflation's dropping, and it feels good, it sounds good, but we can't really look at that as an excuse to go back to our normal spending habits. You look at food and you look at rent, and there's so much pressure on the global food supply, rising demand, extreme weather, war, that expecting food prices to fall, it just isn't realistic. And, you think about landlords, they're under pressure from high interest rates and from having bought when the market was hot, that they can't afford to cut their tenants any deals on rents. So it's nice to think that inflation's coming down, and, overall it is. But for those daily expenses, we've really got to be careful that we're keeping track of our spending and our debt to make sure that we're not, getting ourselves into a hole we can't get out of.
You're a proponent of using technology to keep track of spending. Can you share with us what you like about that and maybe what apps work in that regard?
Absolutely. You should use technology to your advantage at any stage of your savings journey. Sign up for price drop alerts or online flyers at the retailers you shop at. Sign up for spending trackers and budgeting tools and automated savings options offered by your bank. And also, you can look into things like food rescue apps. Now, what these do is alert you to discounted prices on foods that nearby grocery stores might be getting ready to toss at the end of the day, fruits, vegetables, bread. The apps are free, and you can often buy the food through the app and then go pick it up at the store.
How are the inflation trends likely to affect the Bank of Canada's decisions on interest rates moving forward? What are your thoughts on preparation for the months ahead?
Yeah, so I'd say this is kind of a good news, bad news situation. Good news, The year-over-year decrease in inflation is exactly what the Bank of Canada has been trying to achieve. Inflation's essentially right in that 2 to 3% target range that the bank has had in its sights, and that probably makes it a lock that they're going to cut the overnight rate again in September. Now, the bad news is that in the next few months, we're going to see two of the most expensive shopping seasons for Canadians, back to school and Christmas. Now, back to school is already well underway, so we can take a look at Christmas. Now, a few more rate cuts from the Bank of Canada, they're not going to make Christmas presents or hotels or gas or flights any cheaper. So we really should start thinking about how we're going to pay for those things now. And I would say if you have room in your budget, consider starting a dedicated Christmas savings fund, which can reduce how much you use your credit card and help you avoid dipping into your long-term savings. Now, the trick here is to name the account. Call it, Christmas Trip 2024 or Jenny's new laptop fund, because doing so can give you a little added motivation to keep contributing to it. Now, if you don't have that room in your budget, you need to start looking at what your credit card balances are today, because our survey data over at NerdWallet shows that it can take some Canadians more than a year to pay off their Christmas credit card spending. So if you're already feeling pressured by the amount of debt you're carrying, or you're worried about what Christmas might do to your credit card balances, start preparing now by paying those balances down as much as you can, so that when January 1st rolls around, you can think about something a little more joyous than credit card debt.
I like that. Obviously, nerdwallet.com/ca is the website people can go to for more tips and ideas.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks a lot, Clay. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks.
Clay Jarvis is lead writer and spokesperson at NerdWallet Canada. It is a company that provides information to educate users to make those financial decisions. It's 3 minutes now to 7 o'clock, and to analyze what's happening in the news this morning with our headlines. Matt Humphrey's back.
Good morning. The University of Manitoba is suing its former law dean. Jonathan Blackbranch was disbarred from the Manitoba Law Society back in February over misspending. This lawsuit alleges he had access to various university funds and knowingly pursued a course of fraudulent conduct. We'll hear more after World Report.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
It is time to check in with Chloe Friesen, who's popped in with an update or an advisory. It looks like you have in your hand.
Yeah, I call these fun traffic notes. The westbound lanes of Highway 44 between Road 39 East and Road 41 East, this is just north of Beausejour, are closed today, and they reopen at 7 p.m. also today, and it's for a film production.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So they're
fun
using
reason, but maybe still annoying.
Right, exactly. So Highway 44 between Road 39 East and Road 41 East, just north of Beausejour, closed until 7 p.m. For some movie magic.
All right, thanks, Chloe.
No problem.
788-3093 if you need to update us on the commute. It's 17 in Winnipeg, partly cloudy. It's going to be sticky and windy today. Winds south 30 to 50, a high of 28 in Winnipeg with a humidex. It'll feel like 33. Well, in the next hour of the show, it is the season of potentially getting stung by a wasp or a bee. They're all over the place. But what if you have allergy? That's very stressful. An alternative to the EpiPen injection might be on its way to Canada. There's a nasal spray that has been approved for emergencies in the United States. That's on our medical column right after 7. Stay tuned. Also in the next hour of the show, as we have been hearing in the news, a regional plan that some say would help Winnipeg and 17 surrounding municipalities better collaborate has been facing opposition from multiple sources. Still ahead, the Premier in the next hour will address some of the concerns we've been hearing about Plan 2050. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to make it as a professional wrestler, you got to do the Death Tour, which might take you to some remote areas of Manitoba. We're going to hear all about it. Stay tuned. World Report's next.
Today on The Current. Then Doug Ford became premier with a promise to scrap green energy projects.
We canceled those terrible wind turbines.
I'm Connie Walker. Ontario's progressive Conservative government has done an about-face on wind power, with a big new push on renewables. What the Green Conservative movement looks like across the country.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Time is running out. CN Rail, CPKC, and their union have until just after midnight tonight to reach a deal. If that does not happen, the country will be thrown into an unprecedented rail work stoppage. Some companies are already enlisting trucks to ship their goods, but as Paula Duhatschek reports, there is a limit to how much trucks can move.
Already, we've had to move a lot of product that was going to be moved on rail to truck right away.
Sam Woods is president of Jory Logistics, a Calgary-based customs broker and freight forwarder. He says he's most concerned about ocean containers, which typically travel to and from port by rail.
If the strike does happen, then we'll just be forced to shift everything to truck, which will be kind of a mad dash to get everything on trucks.
Woods isn't alone. Stephen Laskowski with the Canadian Trucking Alliance says for months now, companies have been making similar plans.
What my members have seen since February, March is an adaptation by the shipping industry, who typically would move freight by rail and now shifting that to truck.
But there's a limit to how much the trucking industry can help in the event of a rail stoppage. John Corey with the Freight Management Association of Canada says certain products can't practically be moved long distances by truck.
Petroleum, agriculture, mining, potash, coal, there's no real alternative.
Plus, he says there just aren't enough trucks or drivers to fill a big gap in transportation.
I hope that people can find an alternative, but trucking is not going to be it.
As for Woods,
everyone doing this at once is going to be a giant issue.
He's used to supply chain problems and coming up with stopgap solutions. Paula Duhacek, CBC News, Calgary.
Russia says Ukraine has launched its biggest drone attack on Moscow yet. It says it defended against 45 drones targeting various parts of the country overnight. And Ukraine says it was defending against Russian attacks too. Julia Chapman has the details.
Moscow's mayor Sergei Sobyanin says 11 drones were aimed at the Russian capital. Several of them were shot down over the city of Podolsk, less than 40 kilometers from the Kremlin. No injuries or serious damage have been reported. Ukraine has not acknowledged the attack, but most of Ukraine's counterattacks are focused on border regions like Belgorod, Bryansk and Kursk. Ukraine's army chief Alexander Syrsky says his forces control more than 1,200 square kilometers of Russian territory in Kursk, including 93 settlements. One Ukrainian soldier spoke to CBC News after returning from Kursk. He says the operation is not just about that region, but aims to help Kyiv's forces elsewhere in the war. Ukraine's Air Force says it also repelled a major Russian attack overnight. It says 50 of 69 drones launched by Moscow were intercepted, as was a cruise missile. 2 ballistic missiles, however, got through. It's not yet clear where they landed. Canada's International Development Minister Ahmed Hussein is in Kyiv, pledging $5.7 million for humanitarian assistance. It will help pay for medical services, rehousing displaced people, and aiding children affected by a conflict now approaching the 2.5-year point. Julia Chapman, CBC News, London.
India's Prime Minister is on his way to Eastern Europe. Narendra Modi will visit Poland and Ukraine. Today, he will sit down with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and President Andrzej Duda. But it is Modi's stop in Ukraine on Friday that is being called landmark and historic. It will be the first by an Indian prime minister since diplomatic relations were established over 30 years ago, and the first face-to-face meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky since Modi's 2-day visit to Moscow last month. While he was there, Modi rebuked President Vladimir Putin for the war in Ukraine. Day 3 of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago starts today with the theme of Fight for Our Freedoms. And the party is calling on American voters to embrace a kinder, gentler brand of politics. But last night, the crowd was fired up by Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. The former first couple are rallying behind Kamala Harris as the party's presidential nominee. The CBC's Katie Simpson was there.
Hello, Chicago!
On his home turf, Barack Obama leaned into the politics he's so well known for, offering a message of hope, embracing the change at the top of the Democratic ticket, enthusiastically endorsing Kamala Harris.
We have a chance to elect someone who has spent her entire life trying to give people the same chances America gave her.
The biggest applause of the night was for former First Lady Michelle Obama, who laced into a searing attack on Donald Trump, accusing him of vilifying minorities, picking apart his claim that migrants are trying to take jobs from Black Americans.
For years, Donald Trump did everything in his power to try to make people fear us. Who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
The Obamas both ended with a similar message, urging Americans to have conversations with people they don't agree with, lead with kindness and grace, and both offered a reality check. While things may feel good in this moment for Democrats, the truth is this election will be close, and they have a lot of work to do. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Chicago.
Remote-controlled underwater vehicles are being deployed off the coast of Sicily. They're being brought in to help crews find the bodies of 6 people who disappeared when a super yacht sank this week. Specialist divers are still trying to reach the hull of the vessel. It's about 50 meters deep underwater. Coast Guard boats are still scanning the area, and UK investigators are working to assess the incident. Matthew Schenk is chair of the Maritime Search and Rescue Council.
There is the eyewitness accounts from the shore and the other vessels. There are obviously survivors from the vessel, but also the wreckage is also intact on the seabed. So we'll be able to use those 3 sources to really get to the bottom of what has happened.
British tech tycoon Michael Lynch is one of the people now presumed dead. He had just been acquitted of fraud charges in June and was on the boat with several people who helped him fight that case. Romanian police have raided the home of Andrew Tate. Again, the online influencer has been charged with human trafficking, rape, and forming a criminal gang to sexually exploit women. Romania's anti-organized crime agency says it searched 4 homes early this morning. They are investigating allegations of human trafficking, the trafficking of minors, and money laundering. Some families and advocates are calling out the Ontario government's new plan to address the opioid crisis. The province announced it will shut down more than half its supervised consumption sites. That money will instead go towards treatment. Officials say they hope to break the cycle of a crisis that is killing roughly 200 Ontarians a month. But others say this plan will only lead to more unnecessary deaths. Lisa Shing reports.
Corey had that drug tested that day, he'd be alive today.
Marie McKenna's son, Corey Smigelski, overdosed on fentanyl in 2018. She says a supervised consumption site could have saved his life.
Doing the drugs there on site is important in case they are tainted. The medical profession is right there to help.
But now there will be fewer of them, according to Ontario's Health Minister Sylvia Jones.
The cycle of addiction is not being broken by using drug consumption sites.
The government is banning sites within 200 meters of a school or daycare, meaning 10 of 17 sites in the province will close by March 31st next year. It's also banning any new supervised consumption sites from opening.
We need to do more to support a journey into treatment and recovery.
With that, the government is putting $378 million into treatment hubs. Those will provide mental health and addiction services and hundreds of supportive housing units.
It's absolutely callous and it's negligent.
Advocates like Diana Chan McNally say while treatment is crucial, so are consumption sites.
So you're going to see more drug use outside and you're going to see a higher incident of overdose.
Ontario put a pause on the creation of sites after a woman was shot and killed by a stray bullet outside one of them last summer. The remaining sites that will stay open will have enhanced safety measures. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
And you can find more on this story on our website, cbcnews.ca. On the Toronto page, click local. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. We've got some sunshine downtown. It's going to be stickier today than even yesterday was. Thanks for joining us. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM. This is Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to CBC. 17, by the way, right now in the city. This hour on the program, if you are someone with an anaphylactic allergy, you might be used to carrying around an EpiPen for an emergency, but there is now a needle-free alternative that could be on the horizon. It's been approved for use in the U.S. It's on our medical column today. It's a nasal spray. Dr. Raj Bhardwaj will tell us all about it. In addition, this hour on the program, it is called the Death Tour. It's a grueling trip in some remote northern Manitoba communities. It's wrestling event tours, and it's something you have to do if you want to make it as a pro. It's also the name of a new documentary that just came out on GEM. Winnipeg wrestling legend Chris Jericho will be on the show this hour. Stay tuned. Right now, let's go back to some more serious news. Matt Humphrey is in with our headlines today.
Good morning. A band councillor with Norway House Cree Nation says his community is working on an animal control bylaw following a 9-year-old girl being seriously injured last Thursday in a dog mauling. Heavenly Monius was bitten on her chest, her cheek, and her arm. She had to be medevaced to hospital. We'll hear more at 7:30. And Premier Wab Kinew says his government will introduce legislation this fall he's calling a freedom bill. The New Democrats plan to allow municipalities to opt out of the Winnipeg metropolitan region, meaning they can also drop out of a new regional planning framework, Plan 2050. At the bottom of the hour, we'll hear what that could mean for the future of municipal development in our neck of the woods.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
Speaking of the Premier, Bartley Kivas had a conversation with Wab Kinew all about Plan 2050. We're going to play you part of that interview, of that feature interview. That is coming up as well, in addition to the news, just before 8 o'clock this morning, so a busy hour ahead. Right now, let's go to Chloe Friesen, who's in with our day's weather and the commute in some more detail.
Good morning. Right now in Winnipeg, partly cloudy at the Forks, 17 degrees. Looking at a mix of sun and cloud today. A high of 28 with the humidex, though, feeling more like 33. Currently in Brandon, 16 degrees, partly cloudy. Dauphin, sunny and 18. In both Brandon and Dauphin, there are you are both under the risk of a thunderstorm right now. In Thompson, partly cloudy, 21 degrees. And I should just add you to the mix, risk of a thunderstorm today for you folks in Thompson as well. I got a call from Jill on the commuter line who says, there's a stall at Portage and Main. It's a busy spot for the commute. It's if you're heading northbound, it's just at Portage and Main. It's in the center lane. It kind of sneaks up on you as you are approaching Portage and Main. So watch out for that. That stall's in the center lane, northbound as you're approaching Portage and Main. And for folks who live in and around Beausejour, your westbound lanes of Highway 44 between Road 39 East and Road 41 East, this is just north of Beausejour, is closed. The closure will reopen tonight at 7 p.m. and it is due to facilitate a film production. So you might see some movie magic happening in that area, but you cannot travel westbound on Highway 44 just north of Beausejour at the moment. If there's anything else getting in your way on the commute, I would love for you to call 204-788-3093.
Well, it is August, and that means that the bees and the wasps are buzzing about. And if you have an allergy to the stings or to something else that can be serious, you know that an EpiPen, as mentioned, is a critical medication. It could, in fact, save your life. Now, a new option for taking the life-saving medicine, though, might be on the market soon. The United States Food and Drug Administration has approved this nasal spray I've been referring to. It's a nasal spray form of the epinephrine drug. It could be available in Canada sometime next year, we understand. And that is, of course, if it gets through Health Canada approvals. Dr. Raj Bhardwaj has the details on today's medical column.
Good morning, Marcy.
So what can you tell us about this new medicine?
Yeah, so in the U.S., it's going to be called Neffy, and it can be used on adults and kids who weigh at least 30 kilograms or 66 pounds. And it's the same thing as what's in an EpiPen. It's epinephrine, but in a slightly different formulation so that it can be absorbed through the nose instead of being injected under your skin or into a muscle, like with an EpiPen or an epinephrine injection that we would give in the emergency department. So the nasal spray has a bigger dose of epinephrine than the EpiPen, just because it has to go in through through your nose and it's not being injected. But the trials have shown that after using the nasal spray version of epinephrine, that the blood levels of epinephrine are equivalent whether you use an auto injector like an EpiPen or this nasal spray version. And the idea is that by having a needle-free option, that might make it more likely that people actually go ahead and get their epinephrine for their deadly allergies sooner.
Remind us what an anaphylactic allergy or reaction looks like in a person.
Yeah, so an anaphylactic reaction is a very specific form of allergic reaction that's usually triggered by a particular allergen. And people often know what those are for themselves, so like think peanuts or specific medications like aspirin. And another really common trigger, especially this time of the year, is venom from stings like wasp stings. And the allergic reaction it's a whole body reaction, and it can be really intense or it can kind of start slow and ramp up. But it usually starts with an itchy rash like hives, and it can also give you stomach cramps and nausea and vomiting. But that's not what's dangerous. The two things that are dangerous are the swelling. So your lips, your tongue, the back of your throat, even the airways in your lungs can swell shut. So that's bad. But even more dangerous, that I think people don't really realize, is that your blood pressure can tank. It can drop so low that you go unconscious and blood can't get to your brain. So the problem that we see in the hospital a lot of the time is people know that they're having an anaphylactic allergy to something, but they don't go and give themselves the epinephrine treatment quickly or quickly enough.
What barriers are preventing people from getting that treatment right away?
Yeah, so I mean, it starts right from, some people don't fill the prescription for their EpiPen because they know that, well, I'm needle phobic, I'm not going to use this, or sometimes they can't afford it. Sometimes, a lot of the time, I think people just don't have their EpiPen with them. They don't carry it with them. They have it, they're like, oh, I'm going for a hike, but I'll leave it in my car kind of thing. And then they're out, a mile from their car and they get stung by a wasp. And another barrier, I think, is that people underestimate the severity of their reaction or the speed of their reaction, because maybe it didn't start right away, or maybe it doesn't feel that bad. It's mostly just a rash at first. And so they're not sure, like, do I need epinephrine? It seems like it's not that bad. And sometimes this is a weird psychological thing, but a lot of times I think people just don't want to make a fuss. They don't want to deal with an allergic reaction with strangers around. And this is another very typical thing that we see, is that, somebody's at a restaurant, they get a bite of something and they're like, oh, that had nuts in it. And so they very politely, excuse themselves from the table and go to the bathroom to either check their rash in the mirror or to make themselves throw up or whatever. But then they collapse there when the reaction really gets going. And then sometimes they're there alone and people don't know where they've gone, or they don't realize that they've been gone for quite a while. And then, of course, there's a barrier with needles, right? If you're not comfortable with giving yourself a needle, then you're not going to use your EpiPen. And that's the idea behind the nasal spray version, that at least, if you've got a needle-free option, maybe you'll be more likely to use it.
What are the other treatments for serious allergic reactions like the ones you're talking about?
Yeah, so, you can take antihistamines. That can be helpful because histamine is the chemical that your immune system is releasing to keep this reaction going. In the hospital, or if you call 911, then, we can start an IV and give fluids directly into your bloodstream to help keep your blood pressure from dropping too low. We can give asthma medicines to help reopen the airways in your lungs if that's required. But the first best treatment for anaphylactic reactions is epinephrine. And the sooner the better. I mean, it does so much to help. It constricts the blood vessels, so that helps to maintain your blood pressure and prevent shock. It opens up your airways to help you breathe. It even helps to stabilize some of the cells that are trying to release even more histamine as part of the reaction. And one thing that we see a lot is that people do figure that, oh, I'm having this allergic reaction. I've gotten stung by a wasp, or I've gotten some peanuts into me, and they reach for antihistamines rather than reaching for their EpiPen. So antihistamines do help the rash. They can make you feel a little bit better, but it doesn't prevent the blood pressure collapse, and it doesn't do much for your airway constriction. And of course, those are the most dangerous parts of an anaphylactic reaction. So I had a prof in med school once he was pretty blunt. He said that if a person with anaphylaxis takes only antihistamine, they'll die without a rash. but they'll still die, right?
It
I mean,
stays
and
with
that's
you,
a
yeah.
little extreme, right? But it gets the point across that epinephrine is the first best treatment for anaphylactic reactions, not antihistamines.
Now, if someone has an anaphylactic reaction and uses their EpiPen, are they good to go?
So that's another important point to remember is that the drugs that we give you with the epinephrine and even antihistamines, things like that, they don't last for forever, right? Whereas the anaphylactic reaction can last for a long time depending on, did you get stung? Well, that venom is in you now, and it takes a while for your body to kind of deal with that. So even if you do use your EpiPen, like first of all, good job. I'm glad you used it. But you still need to either get to a hospital or even better, get the hospital to you by calling 911. So we can do things like, check your blood pressure in your airway and maintain those. We can start other medications and treatments like we talked about. We can put an IV in and give you fluids so that you don't go into shock. But we can also observe you for often several hours because as your medications wear off, we want to make sure that it doesn't sort of unmask an ongoing reaction. So really important to get yourself to a safe place like a hospital. But, of course, also carry your EpiPen, know how to use it. There's lots of good videos online to help you with that. And if you are needle phobic, then hopefully within about a year, there will be this, maybe this alternative nasal spray formulation coming, assuming that it gets approved by Health Canada.
All right, Dr. Bardwaj, thank you.
My pleasure.
That is our host, Dr. Raj Bardwaj. 7:22 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're on CBC. 17 degrees in this Wednesday morning. We've got new soul music from Quebec musician Borza.
Look who's back. Look who's back. I hoped you would come. You don't seem at ease. Seems like you've been teased. Till you've been hurting. You say that you've been had and that made you come back. Seems like you've been brawling. Yeah, I can tell you've been hurting. You say you don't see stars no more in the light, but in so bright. So think back, yeah, look back and see the stars again in the light. Don't feel bad, don't be so sad. You found your way. It's alright. So kick back, you just won't try. But you're back and it's alright. It's like you went offline. 'Cause you can still see stars in your eyes. Your memories, they come alive. So look back and live it back and see the stars again in the light. And your eyes can shine again all the time. You see the stars again in the light, and your eyes can shine again all the time.
That is new music from Borza, who is out solo Montreal artist who has worked with the likes of Emmylou Harris in the past, but now stepping out. This single's called Look Back. It is 7:25 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. 17 in the city of Winnipeg, mostly cloudy, although we just saw a shot on our YouTube channel of some beautiful sun streaming above the buildings here downtown. So it's coming in and out. We're going to have a day like that, mix of sun and cloud. High 28, humidex 33. Brandon's partly cloudy, 16. Thompson's partly cloudy, and 21 degrees. Well, it is time for morning sports, and Paul McGowan joins us once again via Zoom. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Marcy.
So let's start with tennis this morning. There's some controversy around a recent investigation into steroid use.
An investigation involving current world number one, Jannik Sinner. We found out yesterday that the Italian had been cleared of steroid use after testing positive for a banned substance back in March. Here's the thing. We had no idea that Sinner was being investigated. He was allowed to keep playing tennis while these tests were being looked into. That does not sit well with other players on the tour. Canada's Denis Shapovalov, for example, tweeted, quote, different rules for different players. Here's Sinner's coach, Darren Cahill, on why the investigation was kept under wraps.
Well, it stayed quiet because we believed he was innocent. There was a lot riding on the fact that if this thing got out without context, that was not great. And so everyone certainly made sure that only the people knew that had to know about this particular incident. So we've been living with this for the last few months, which has been challenging and difficult. And certainly for Jannik, he's been the one who's suffered through this the most, and he's the one that's also had to get out there and play tennis.
Apologies for that squeak of a tennis shoe. The private nature of the investigation aside, the story behind the positive test is interesting. It's that his physiotherapist was using a topical spray that contained the banned substance and was using that spray not on Sinner, but on himself, on a cut on one of his hands, and then by working on Sinner, contaminated him. It's either a fascinating accident or a brilliant loophole. Now, the International Tennis Integrity Agency ultimately decided that Sinner was not at fault, but they did claw back the standing points that he earned at Indian Wells, which is the tournament where he tested positive. They also clawed back the prize money from that tournament, a total of $325,000 US. So Sinner not untouched by this controversy, but crucially for him, he is still part of the ATP Tour.
What a strange story. As you said, we won't know, we'll never know what really happened, perhaps, but wow.
No.
Let's go to CFL News this morning. We finally heard from Argonauts quarterback Chad Kelly, right?
Yeah, he's been kind of kept from the media in his first couple of days back with the team. He's returning from that 9-game suspension tied to his alleged harassment of a team employee. He's back with the team and yesterday took questions from reporters.
I've grown, I've learned from not only the past couple months, but every day I'm trying to get better, be a better person. I have to own up to my mistakes, and I know what I did wrong, and I've learned from it. I've done more than what is being asked for me because I want to get it right. I want to make sure everybody believes that I'm never going to do something like this again, but I know I affected a lot of people, including the person, so I just want everybody to know that, I'm sorry and I will be better.
Chad Kelly, they are confirmed to be starting on Thursday for the Argos. And that game on Thursday is in Toronto, so we'll see what kind of reception he gets from the home crowd. Meanwhile, the Bombers starting practice today for Friday's matchup with the Ticats.
And it is the middle of August, obviously, but we have hockey news to talk about.
This transaction, I guess you can call it, between the St. Louis Blues and the Edmonton Oilers, it gets into the weeds of the NHL salary cap, but the short version is the Blues offered very lucrative deals called offer sheets to a pair of Oilers players who were technically under Edmonton's control. Now, those players accepted and are members today of the St. Louis Blues. Offer sheets don't get used that often. They're seen as kind of predatory, as being against the unwritten rules of the game. St. Louis GM Doug Armstrong, unsurprisingly, does not feel that way.
If there is a GM code not to do offer sheets, nobody emailed it to me. This is a tool that I think everyone uses and should use. And I think it was reported that I wouldn't have done this to Kenny Hall, and that's quite honestly, I'd do it to my mother if she was managing the Oilers.
Just an incredible line. Either Doug Armstrong's mom has a great sense of humor, or he definitely owes her a phone call today. In any event, some mid-August hockey news, the St. Louis Blues signing Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway to 2-year deals.
All right, thanks a lot, Paul. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Marcy.
That is Paul McGowan with Morning Sports, filling in for Scott Regehr. It is coming up to news time. If you need us on the morning commutes, please pass along any issue at 788-3093. And still ahead on the program, it is called the Death Tour. It is a grueling series of events that takes wrestlers to remote northern Manitoba communities where they test their strength and their grit. And there is a new documentary coming out all about this on CBC Gem. Our very own Jim Agapito had a chance chance to sit down with Chris Jericho, who is a Winnipegger and wrestling legend, who's featured in the film, and he co-produced it as well. So stay tuned. We're going to have that interview for you and hear more about the Death Tour coming up right after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. At 7:30, it's mostly cloudy and 17 degrees in Brandon, 17 degrees and mainly clear over downtown Winnipeg. Good morning. I'm Matt Humphrey. The NDP government plans to allow municipalities to opt out of the Winnipeg metropolitan region. This means they can also drop out of a new regional planning framework. The CBC's Bartley Kivas explains.
Premier Wab Kinew says his government will introduce legislation this fall that he calls a freedom bill. It'd allow municipalities who are part of the Winnipeg metro region to leave and no longer have to change any of their rules to conform to Plan 2050. That's a standardized set of land use rules for Winnipeg and 17 neighboring municipalities. Kinew says the former PC government imposed this planning regime on Winnipeg's neighbors.
We're going to bring freedom back to the equation. We're going to allow these locally elected municipal officials to represent their ratepayers.
Selkirk Chief Administrative Officer Dwayne Nickel praised the decision.
This is a good opportunity, a good option for those who would like to go in a different direction.
Winnipeg's mayor said the area still needs better coordination. Otherwise, he fears businesses will avoid the capital region. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A band counselor with Norway House Cree Nation says the community is working on an animal control bylaw. Dion Clark says it follows a 9-year-old girl suffering serious injuries last Thursday in a dog mauling. Heavenly Monius was bitten on her cheek, chest, and arm. She had to be medevaced to Winnipeg and remains in Children's Hospital. Clark says he was shocked to hear about the attack and hopes new rules help prevent further issues.
And unfortunately, the timing wasn't quick enough where we weren't able to implement it right away. So that still has to go through a process. But in the meantime, we've started working with people in the community to help capture the dogs and have them sent out.
Clark says new rules may require pet owners to register their animals and to keep them on leashes or face fines. He says any stray dogs, which are captured, will be taken by rescue groups. Down south, American voters are being urged to consider a kinder, gentler brand of politics. Barack and Michelle Obama made the pitch last night as they rallied behind Kamala Harris as the Democratic Party's presidential nominee. The CBC's Katie Simpson reports from the convention in Chicago.
Something wonderfully magical is in the air, isn't it? Yeah. It's the contagious power of hope.
Former First Lady Michelle Obama drew a standing ovation and huge applause, urging Americans to unite behind Kamala Harris, accusing Donald Trump of stoking fear for political gain. A message echoed by her husband, former President Barack Obama.
We do not need 4 more years of bluster and bumbling and chaos. We have seen that movie before, and we all know that the sequel is usually worse.
Both warned Democrats the energetic feeling at the convention is not necessarily reflective of the rest of the country, and that while things may feel positive in this moment, the election is going to be close. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Chicago.
The University of Manitoba is suing its former law dean for nearly $700,000 in unauthorized spending. The lawsuit filed in Manitoba's Court of King bench last week says Jonathan Blackbranch misspent funds on professional development courses, members-only clubs, and personal expenses between 2016 and 2020. Blackbranch was disbarred from the Manitoba Law Society in February. Multiple previous attempts by CBC to contact Blackbranch have been unsuccessful, and none of the allegations have been proven in court. And researchers at the University of Manitoba are working with the Pasquiac Cree Nation to develop a smart vegetable, one that's more nutritious than grocery store produce and has characteristics to combat health conditions like diabetes. Almost half of the adult population in Opaskwayak is suffering from type 2 diabetes. Ruchira Nadusi is a researcher at the Canadian Centre for Agri-Food Research in Health and Medicine.
We are trying to increase these bioactive compounds in these vegetables by manipulating certain conditions. So, for example, nutrients, for example, light.
And Brianne Semenko is a registered dietitian doing the research as a PhD project.
We're hoping to have improved blood glucose control and improved inflammation. Those are the two main things that I hope to see, but we're looking at a variety of different health parameters like blood pressure, and we're looking at heart function as well. So trying to see who would benefit from consuming these vegetables.
In Opaskwack, they're growing their smart veggies in a hydroponic smart farm. LED lights mimic sunshine. Artificial intelligence controls the temperature and moisture and carbon dioxide levels, and it produces vegetables faster, bringing food security to places where fresh produce can be hard to get and expensive to buy. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
Did you grow anything yourself this year, Matt? Did you do any gardening?
My wife just harvested our cherry tomatoes.
Nice. How'd you do? Good?
I mean, I can't take credit, but they honestly were the best tomatoes I've ever had.
Nice.
Yeah.
I failed this year entirely. I actually didn't let myself buy tomatoes because I was like, don't do it if you're not going to take care of them. I knew we were going away. I can't bear to watch the plants like suffer, and I had no one to, you really watch over them. So I was like, don't do it. But you should have seen me in the garden center. I passed by the plants and I was like itching. I'm like, look at that beautiful tomato plant. And I'm like, look away, look away.
It's worth it. Next year I can swing by and water your plants for you if you go anywhere.
I'll take you up on that. Take you up on that. Thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
All right, Matt Humphrey in our news department this morning, filling in for Heather Wells. Chloe Friesen is back in with a look at our weather traffic. Good morning.
Good morning. Right now in Winnipeg, mostly cloudy skies, 17 degrees. We're looking at a humid and a windy day here in the city. A mix of sun and cloud, wind south 30, gusting to 50, a high of 28, but feeling more like 33 with that humidity out there. Tomorrow in Winnipeg, cloudy skies, showers beginning early in the morning, or the risk of a thunderstorm tomorrow. Wind south 30, gusting to 50. With the humidex, our forecasted highs about 32 degrees tomorrow here in Winnipeg. Moving to Brandon, you folks in Brandon, 17 degrees right now, partly cloudy. You can see the risk of a thunderstorm this afternoon and a 30% chance of showers as well. Wind southeast 20, gusting to 40, a high of 27. Similar right now in Dauphin, sunny, 18 degrees. Cloudy skies, 60% chance of showers this morning and early this afternoon with the risk of a thunderstorm. High of 27 with humidex feeling like 35. And Thompson, you're also looking at the risk of a severe thunderstorm this morning, actually. Currently partly cloudy, 21 degrees up in Thompson. You're looking at mainly cloudy skies with a 60% chance of showers or thunderstorms. Still some local smoke in the air in Thompson. High of 28, feeling like 33 with that humidex. So some smoky, humid air out there. You might not want to spend too much time doing any strenuous activity outside today. Turning to the commute, we got a call on the commuter line a bit earlier about a stall just at Portage and Main if you're heading northbound. It's in the center lane as you're approaching that intersection. And Jill, who called, said it really sneaks up on you. So that could be slowing folks down at Portage and Main this morning. If you are in the area and you have any updates, if that stall has been removed, I would love to hear from you. As well, just a reminder that if you live near Beausejour or in Beausejour, your westbound lanes of Highway 44 between Road 39 East and Road 41 East, this is just north of Beausejour, will be closed today until 7 p.m. And this also happens tomorrow from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. And this closure is to facilitate a film production. There is a detour in place, so that is some good news. But just if you come across that, that's what it's for. It's for some movie magic just north of Beausejour. And of course, if there is anything else that is getting in your way or slowing you down this morning, you can give us a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Chloe. Well, next on the show, it is called the Death Tour. It's a grueling series of events that takes wrestlers to remote northern Manitoba communities where they test their strength and their grit. It's a chance to prove themselves on their way to going pro. But it can also come with a cost that can really test a person. The Death Tour is also the name of a documentary that's coming out on CBC Gem, and it is at the end of the week. It comes out August 23rd. Here's a bit of a clip from it.
The Death Tour is the hardest tour there is in sports.
If you want to be a wrestler, the Death Tour is a definite way to prove to yourself and to others that you have what it takes. Problem is, to get there, it's not easy.
There's a Demi blocking the road.
Instead of being there till 2 o'clock this morning.
When wrestling does arrive to these very remote, isolated indigenous communities, it's like WrestleMania, in the reservation.
We got to perform every night. After 3 weeks of it, a couple of them, if not all of them, will crack.
Y'all ready?
And we are off.
No alcohol, no drugs. Do not break those rules.
You're probably not going to have cell service up there, so how will you keep in touch?
Smoke signals.
But way up north where it's really remote, people feel hopeless.
Sometimes you can kind of feel that dark energy in the communities.
Tony Candello, who's been running these tours, he says this is the most deaths he's had on any tour.
That's a bit of a clip from the trailer from the Death Tour, which, as I mentioned, is being released on Friday on CBC Gem. Winnipegger and wrestling legend Chris Jericho is featured in the film. He actually co-produced it as well, and he spoke to CBC's Jim Agapito at the Winnipeg film screening last week.
I need action. I'm a professional. All right. Hey, what's going on,
Hey.
man? Good to see you, man.
All right.
Thank you for this.
Well, thank you for doing this.
The pleasure's all yours. Come on. You're going with that old standard, that old chestnut?
Chris, thank you so much for joining us here today. Now, I got to ask, the Death Tour, it's something that you've taken a part in. You know, what's that like?
So if you're on the Canadian independent wrestling scene, which is where we all start, there's something that's like it's a legendary kind of tale called the Death Tour. What is the Death Tour? It's a wrestling tour that goes in northern Manitoba in the wintertime. And the reason why it's called the Death Tour is it's very hard to get to all of these communities, indigenous communities in northern Manitoba that we go to. So you're talking about driving over a frozen lake for 13 hours, and then you got a one-way road. If a tree falls, then you're stuck for hours on end. It's very grueling, but it's also a rite of passage. And then you get to the community, the reservation, and then you set up the ring, and then you wrestle the show, and then you take the ring down, and then you get your sleeping bag, and you go sleep on the floor of a gym, of basically a high school gym. And it's minus 30 outside, and there's not a lot of heat in there. And then if you want to get something to eat, you buy a peanut butter sandwich for, $30 at the store at the Hudson Bay, because that's what it costs up there. So it's one of those things like you want to do it, but then once you start doing it, you're like, this is crazy. Like, why am I doing this? You're doing it for the experience. You're doing it for the chance to learn. And for the hundreds of people that have been on the Death Tour, quite a few of them have become world champions. Kenny Omega, Chris Jericho, Edge, Christian, Luther, Don Callis, Rhino. I mean, there's so many of kind of the local guys that have gone on these tours and have become main event stars. This is one thing that I really enjoyed as we were filming this, is, you get a chance to be the main event, WrestleMania, all-in star that you always envision yourself to be. And if you're in the crowd watching, and this is where the movie got a lot deeper for me, it gives you a chance to see the WrestleMania all-in for your particular community. Nobody's going up there. There's nothing up in these areas. When you get a chance to see the wrestling show, the Tony Candello Tour, if it's once a year, that gives you something to believe in, both in the ring and out of the ring watching. And that's what I really started realizing about this film. It's so much more than just fun wrestling stories. It's a way of life to give people something to believe in. You can see just the relationship that the guys and girls in the ring have with the guys and girls watching. You see in the movie, I'm looking at a picture of the matriarch right now here. She's Indigenous, and she goes up there, and they're mobbed at the end of the shows. These kids just going crazy. You're our hero. You win for us. We love you. Like, these kids will never forget the time they went to the wrestling show in their town of Bloodvein or Peguis or whatever it is, and got to see, like, they might never remember her name, but they got to see the lady who was the wrestler that was one of us. We can do this too. This gives them some positivity.
The biggest takeaways you want the audience to get from watching this film? What is it, the heart of it, that you want people to understand about this tour?
It's not just for wrestling fans or just for First Nation or just for Manitobans. It's for anybody that likes a good story that involves all these different elements, but basically boils down to just dreams. And can you make them come true? I don't care what level it is. In this movie, we see people make their dreams come true, and that's the most important thing.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Because if you didn't enjoy it, I'd take you around back in the woodshed.
CBC's Jim Agapito speaking to Winnipegger and professional wrestling legend Chris Jericho there. If you want to watch the Death Tour, you can check it out on CBC Gem, and it comes out at the end of the week, August 23rd.
A $6 billion con.
It didn't take long for it to spread like wildfire,
which destroyed lives and devastated communities.
Every little town across the nation, people had shares in this.
We lost everything. And to date, no one has been brought to justice.
Somebody knows more than we know.
The $6 billion gold scam. From the BBC World Service and CBC, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's Dr. Raj Bardwaj here. It's back to school time, and that means another episode of our Kids Questions column. So if you're a kid, you're getting back to school, if you have any health or medical questions for me, send them on in, and I will see how many I can answer next week.
So they don't have to be back to school questions, kids. It can be any medical question you've got about your mental or physical health. Sometimes people simply ask, what is a headache? Or what happens when, something goes on with a cramp in my leg? How can I get rid of that? So anything goes. What are your questions for Dr. Bardwaj, kids? Get them in on the listener line, 204-788-3205, 204-788-3205. Or you can email if you'd like. win@cbc.ca is where you can email your questions for Dr. Bardwaj. It is 7:46 a.m., 17, mostly cloudy in Winnipeg. Going to be hot today again, high of 28 with humidex 33. And coming up after 8 o'clock on the program, we're going to dip into the Burt Block Party. So much fun downtown, tons of bands coming to town, kicking it old school, and also a little bit of new school and lots of local. So award-winning and Juno-nominated local band Indian City is playing the Burt Block Party tomorrow night. And we're going to hear from a couple members of the group ahead of the party. And that's coming up after 8 o'clock on the show. And spoiler alert, we have tickets. They're going to be up for grabs, give you a chance to win. So stay tuned. And this is one of the first times in terms of a big performance with Blue Rodeo. The Sky Digger is going to be on stage with Indian City. This is one of the first times that the group's going to be performing without their lead singer at a venue like this, certainly. Vince Fontaine. He passed away suddenly 2 years ago. His daughter is now really at the helm of fronting the band. She's going to be one of our guests after 8 o'clock, and she talks a lot about her father and also the relationship that the group has with Blue Rodeo's Jim Cuddy. So stay tuned. We will hear all about what's coming up at the Burt Block Party, and we will have a pair of tickets and give you a chance to win those as well. So that's all coming up for you after 8 o'clock. Right now, speaking of music, using a single microphone and a cassette tape in a cabin in the woods, Boy Golden created his new album. It's called For Eden. This is the lead single. It's called Here to Stay.
I'm gonna face my demons, even if it breaks my legs, even if it breaks my spirit, walking around downtown all day. We all got our own reasons, all got bills to pay. One day, son, you'll get it straight, and you won't have to walk this way. Wake up and place your bets. Wake up and wait in line. One day you'll pay off all your debt. I know it ain't the time. Changing with the seasons, going it all alone. I got friends, and when I see them, it feels like coming home. Yes, it does. Grab a drink, come on by. Anytime you're getting high, place your bets and get in line. Even losers get to try from time to time. Get it right. Ain't that a sweet thought? Sweetheart, I ain't one to lie. Take my leave of Winnipeg. Winnipeg, get myself a place off a Highway 5 mountain road someday, but not today. Find myself some peace of mind just behind my eyes. There's a bluebird waiting to sing her song, and I'm gonna let her fly. Let her fly. Well, I used to let her out at night when everyone's asleep. In my dreams it's broad daylight and I let her kiss my cheek. Never thought I'd be the man that I am today. Hey, here I am despite my plans. I think I'm here to stay.
Here to stay from Boy Golden local music this morning. And Boy Golden doing well, having a busy summer, just completing a tour right now out of Peterborough, so touring out east. It is 7:51 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app or YouTube. Next on the show, let's turn our attention to something that's been making news. Supporters say this is going to help Winnipeg and surrounding municipalities better collaborate. But some Manitobans are hesitant to hop on to the Plan 2050 bandwagon. Earlier this week, we've been talking about some of the conspiracy theories surrounding this, but conspiracy is not the only thing plaguing Plan 2050. At least 5 of the 18 municipalities that are included in the plan say they are actually opposed to it. Selkirk, Niverville, Headingley, St. Andrews, and East St. Paul have all been protesting their involvement. They say the plan costs too much, and they are worried it will deprive them of the ability to make their own land use decisions. All of that is the backdrop for part of a conversation we're going to hear from a feature interview between CBC's Bartley Kives, who met with Premier Wab Kinew.
When the legislature resumes for the fall sitting, we're going to introduce a freedom bill to bring freedom to the municipalities who want out from the Winnipeg metro region, this big planning exercise. If it's going to be something that's voluntary in the future, I think that's probably the path forward. Basically, this is something that was forced by Pallister and Stephenson. This is a Pallister-Stephenson special. So we're going to bring freedom back to the equation. We're going to allow these locally elected municipal officials to represent their ratepayers, to represent their constituents. And we've heard a lot about this going back many years. I think, you think of a city like Selkirk as one example. They've been very clear about this. They opposed it from the beginning. And now, after taking some time and looking at the situation, we think it's an important step to return that power to locally elected democratic officials instead of trying to centralize everything like the previous PC government was up to.
So does this mean Plan 2050 can move forward without all municipalities?
Well, what we plan to do is introduce a bill this fall, a freedom bill. It'll make it voluntary to be part of this process. The idea that the provincial government under Pallister and Stephenson was going to force everyone into this joint exercise, or going to take that local democratic freedom away from people, I don't think is right. So we're going to undo that, and we're going to restore some level of local democratic decision making and self-determination. I know people out there, they want to have that freedom to decide where they're going to live, to make decisions about their local community. And so we've been hearing a lot of that over the course of the summer, and I think now is the right time for us to undo this part of the Pallister and Stephenson legacy that the PCs brought in.
What would you say to the idea that that would effectively kill this planning exercise if enough municipalities leave it?
Well, it's important that we respect democracy. And we're hearing very clearly from democratically elected officials that this is something that's standing in the way of them being able to do the right thing for their local citizens. And so we're a listening government. And so we're going to listen. We're going to bring in this freedom bill and, just ensure that that democratic right is respected.
Mayor Gillingham has said that without regional planning, some businesses have bypassed the Winnipeg area, and that businesses have said, look, we would like some sort of regional coordination here. What would you say to that pushback towards this decision?
We're a business-friendly government, and we're spending a lot of time and resources creating good jobs for the average Manitoban out there. Economic development is a major priority, and I think that the best way for us to grow the economy is to send a message that we've got freedoms and democracy here in Manitoba, and this bill that we're going to bring in to undo the PC legacy brought in under Heather Stephenson and Brian Pallister is one way for us to do that. I think that respecting local democratic leaders is an important step, and this is one thing that we're going to do with this new bill come the fall.
When you look at cities like Ottawa Carleton or the Durham region in Ontario, they control large rural areas outside of urban areas so that you don't get situations like you have in Winnipeg where you have a whole bunch of industrial businesses on McGillivray in, McDonald just outside city limits and all these industrial businesses just outside of Transcona in Springfield. If there was a request for Winnipeg or even from business owners for Winnipeg to annex some of its parts of neighboring municipalities, what would you say to that idea?
Well, I think the key word that you use there is control. And in our view, under our government, the control belongs to the citizens who decide where they want to live, who decide who they want to cast a ballot for. And in the most recent provincial election, you rejected Heather Stephenson and Brian Pallister, and you elected our team. And so our team is going to listen. And we're going to say, for folks in maybe a Niverville or a Selkirk who've identified concerns with this 2050 thing and with the Winnipeg metro region, we're giving the freedom back for you to determine your own destiny. And for other folks, it's voluntary. If you want to go together with this planning exercise, if you think that that's a benefit for your family, for your community, for your neighborhood, then that path is going to be open for you as well.
So leaving Plan 2050 aside, how concerned are you, though, about the balkanization of tax regimes and municipal rules and development charges between Winnipeg and some of its neighboring municipalities?
I think we're really lucky to have a lot of innovation happening in the province right now. I live in Winnipeg. This is, what our family has decided is the right fit for us in terms of exercising that free choice. But when I go to watch hockey at Niverville and I see that amazing recreation and high school complex they have there and all the growth on their main drag, I think that great things are happening in Niverville. And when I go to Selkirk and I see all the environmental initiatives and the new library and the business investments that are happening there, I think they've got a lot of great leadership going on too. So I think what's really important for us at the provincial level is to ensure that we're respecting the local decision making, the freedom for people to decide what's the best path forward for a Selkirk, the best path forward for Winnipeg, the best path forward for a Niverville, and really just to ensure that the right tools are there. We're going to grow the economy, we're going to grow the province, but we got to ensure that democracy and freedom is respected along the way.
Premier Wab Kinew in conversation with CBC's Bartley Kivas about Plan 2050. Now, you can read more about this at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Tomorrow, the Premier will join us here live for our monthly interview where we can dig into more questions around the plan, around can you have it both ways? Having some municipalities opt in, some opt out. What does that mean for planning itself? And also other questions will obviously come up during our monthly interview. This is my opportunity to invite you to tell us what you would like us to talk about with the Premier. You can call our listener line today, 788-3205. Let's get into the news headlines now with Matt Humphrey.
Researchers at the U of M at the University of Manitoba are working with the Northern First Nation to develop smart vegetables. Vegetables with increased nutritional characteristics that may even help combat health conditions such as diabetes. More after World Report.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
Chloe Friesen's in with a quick update.
Yeah, quick look at the commute here. Dennis called. There's a really slow train that's crossing Marion and really backing up traffic. Dennis called again. The train had just stopped, so really backed up around Marion. Thank you for that call.
All right, thanks, Chloe. Thank you, Dennis. 17, mostly cloudy in Winnipeg. Still ahead after 8 o'clock on the program. An outdoor block party is going to rock Winnipeg streets later this week. One of the bands is Manitoba rock royalty Indian City. We're going to hear from Gabrielle Fontaine, who took over from her dad as band leader, as well as Jay Bodner. They're going to join us after 8 o'clock, and we have tickets to give away for tomorrow night's Burt Block Party.
Today on Q.
I'm Talia Schlanger, sitting in for Tom Power. Country singer Mackenzie Porter grew up in a family that ranched by day and played music by night near Medicine Hat, Alberta. She's co-hosting this year's Canadian Country Music Awards and will tell you about ranching and songwriting.
I'm thinking about those days, I'm thinking about the 98.
Q. This morning at 10, 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Connie Walker. Ontario's progressive Conservative government has done an about-face on wind power, with a big new push on renewables. What the Green Conservative movement looks like across the country, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Time is running out. CN Rail, CPKC, and their union have until just after midnight tonight to reach a deal. If that does not happen, the country will be thrown into an unprecedented rail work stoppage. Some companies are already enlisting trucks to ship their goods. But as Paula DeHatchik reports, there is a limit to how much trucks can move.
Already, we've had to move a lot of product that was going to be moved on rail to truck right away.
Sam Woods is president of Jory Logistics, a Calgary-based customs broker and freight forwarder. He says he's most concerned about ocean containers, which typically travel to and from port by rail.
If the strike does happen, then we'll just be forced to shift everything to truck, which will be kind of a mad dash to get everything on trucks.
Woods isn't alone. Stephen Laskowski with the Canadian Trucking Alliance says for months now, companies have been making similar plans.
What my members have seen since February, March is an adaptation by the shipping industry, who typically would move freight by rail and now shifting that to truck.
But there's a limit to how much the trucking industry can help in the event of a rail stoppage. John Corey with the Freight Management Association of Canada says certain products can't practically be moved long distances by truck.
Petroleum, agriculture, mining, potash, coal, there's no real alternative.
Plus, he says there just aren't enough trucks or drivers to fill a big gap in transportation.
I hope that people can find an alternative, but trucking is not going to be it.
As for Woods,
everyone doing this at once is going to be a giant issue.
He's used to supply chain problems and coming up with stopgap solutions. Paula DeHatchik, CBC News, Calgary.
Russia says it has fended off the largest attack on its capital by Ukrainian drones yet. Russian social media channels are sharing videos of drones being destroyed by air defense systems. Defense officials say the military destroyed 45 drones overnight. 11 of them were reportedly targeting the Moscow region. The Ukrainian Air Force also says Russia launched nearly 70 drones at its territory overnight. An invigorated Democratic Party is gathering again today in Chicago. It is day 3 of the National Convention. Last night, Barack and Michelle Obama took jabs at Donald Trump over his past comments, including those about crowd sizes, while encouraging voters to steer towards a kinder brand of politics. The CBC's Ethel Musa joins me now from Chicago. And Ethel, what a night for a party that just a couple of weeks ago appeared to be flailing.
Indeed, the energy inside Chicago's United Center reached a whole new level last night. Kamala Harris wasn't there, but her presence was felt. The vice president was at a rally in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a crucial battleground state in the exact arena where Donald Trump accepted the Republican nomination last month. That rally was carried live on the Jumbotron in Chicago, allowing Harris to speak directly to 2 packed arenas at the same time. But the highlight of the evening was Michelle and Barack Obama, the former First Lady and President, urging Americans to get out and vote. The two also took digs at former President Donald Trump, who last month falsely told a group of Black journalists that immigrants were taking away Black jobs. Michelle Obama's retort last night ignited the audience.
His limited, narrow view of the world made him feel threatened by the existence of 2 hardworking, highly educated, successful people who happen to be Black. Who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those Black jobs?
What are we expecting tonight?
Kamala Harris's running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, will be giving the headline address at the convention. Walz wasn't widely known outside of Minnesota before Harris chose him. His speech tonight will be an opportunity for him to introduce himself to Americans. Walz is a former teacher and member of the U.S. Army National Guard. He also comes from rural America, and the hope among many Democrats is that he will help Harris win in 3 key Midwest states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Thank you, Ethel.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Ethel Musa in Chicago. Panama has started to deport people who have entered its territory illegally, and the United States is helping to pay for part of the cost. In July, the two countries signed an agreement to control what they call irregular migration. The U.S. is trying to slow the number of migrants crossing its southern border. Freelance reporter Manuel Rueda has more on the story.
After years of being a pathway for illegal immigrants to the U.S., Panama is making good on a promise to try and stem the flow. Early on Tuesday, a group of 30 Colombians, handcuffed and shackled, were led onto a charter flight by Panamanian immigration officers. They recently crossed the treacherous Darien Gap and entered Panama without travel permits, making them eligible for deportation.
Esperamos regularizar a medida que
I hope
vayamos.
these flights become more regular, Panama's Vice Minister of Security, Luis Felipe Icaza, said in a press conference. More than 500,000 migrants from South America, Asia, and Africa passed through Panama on their way to the United States last year. The roadless and hilly rainforest on the southern edge of Panama, known as the Darien Gap, has become one of the world's most transited migration routes. For several years, U.S. officials have been looking at ways to discourage migrants from using it. In July, they signed a $6 million deal with Panama's new government that includes funding for deportation flights and programs that will train Panama's police to process migrants and identify those with criminal records. With around 1,000 people crossing each day, however, only a small percentage are likely to end up on deportation flights. Panama and the U.S. are hoping that the chances of being deported might discourage some migrants from taking this route. Manuel Rueda for CBC News, Bogotá.
Emergency workers walked through the wreckage of a bus crash in central Iran. At least 28 pilgrims from Pakistan were killed when the bus overturned and burst into flames. At least 23 others were injured. It happened in the province of Yazd. Officials say the bus was traveling through Iran to Iraq for a Shia Muslim ritual. Initial reports from Iranian traffic police say the brakes on the bus were defective. Authorities in Pakistan have charged a man with cyber terrorism. He's accused of spreading disinformation thought to have fueled riots across the UK. Those riots erupted after the stabbing attack that killed 3 young girls in Southport last month. An article was published on the website Channel 3 Now. It gave a false name for the suspected attacker and suggested he was an asylum seeker who arrived in the UK by boat. Broad anti-immigration protests broke out across Britain. Police in Pakistan allege Farhan Asif runs that website. Researchers at the University of Manitoba are working with a Northern First Nation to develop a smart vegetable, one that has characteristics to combat health conditions like diabetes. But the researchers are battling concerns about so-called fake food. As Karen Pauls tells us, convincing people to eat unfamiliar vegetables can be a challenge.
So these are broccoli sprouts.
Operations Manager Stephanie Cook is showing off the Opaskwayak Cree Nation's Smart Farm, a futuristic-looking lab in a remote northern Manitoba community.
We grow up to day 10.
And there's no soil?
No.
LED lights mimic sunshine. Artificial intelligence controls temperature, moisture, carbon dioxide, and nutrient levels.
Getting the care that it would need in order to be an optimum product.
Researchers have found activating specific compounds with health benefits, like potassium and manganese, are making these veggies up to 11 times more nutritious than grocery store vegetables. Mi-Young Su teaches nutritional sciences at the University of Manitoba.
They can consume much less
but they still same benefits.
Almost half of the adult population in the Opaskwayak Cree Nation lives with type 2 diabetes. Leaders say there's an average of 3 diabetes-related deaths every month. At the same time, Cook says part of the challenge is encouraging people to eat these smart vegetables.
People were like, oh, it's artificial, it's fake food.
So, food scientists developed recipes and brought a meal to the local shopping mall.
Would you like to try some chili with kale?
Excellent.
Have you ever eaten kale before?
I don't even know what that is.
The goal is to educate people on how smart veggies contribute to a healthy diet and ultimately save lives. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Opaskwayak Cree Nation, Manitoba.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday morning. Thanks for spending some time with us here at Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. 8:10 a.m. is the time right now, and another hot, sticky day on the way for Winnipeg. But I'll tell you what, it's perfect summer weather, and maybe it'll continue tomorrow and through the weekend as the Burt Block Party gets ready to get underway in downtown Winnipeg. This half hour on the program, we, spoiler alert, have some tickets that we're going to give away. In addition, we're going to have a conversation with award-winning and Juno-nominated local band Indian City. They're playing the Burt Block Party tomorrow. So we're going to hear from lead vocalist Gabrielle Fontaine, who took over from her dad as band leader, as well as Jay Bodner. They're going to both join us this half hour with a conversation about what they're looking forward to. And we'll try to squeeze some details out of them because they're playing with Blue Rodeo and Sky Diggers on the bill. So we'll see whether or not there's going to be some collaborations if you're going to that show. So stay with us. Right now, let's go to Matt Humphrey, who's here from our news department with our headlines.
Good morning. We have a silver alert this morning. 69-year-old Alan Hunter was last seen in the Transcona area on August 20th, as of yesterday, that is. Afternoon. Yesterday afternoon was when he was last seen. He's 5'8", with a thin build, gray hair, blue eyes. He's possibly wearing a blue plaid shirt and blue jeans. Anyone who has information is asked to contact police, and you can see Mr. Hunter's photo at our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. I'll have more news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
Chloe Friesen is also here this morning, filling in for Corey. Hi there, Chloe.
Hello, good morning. I'm so excited for that Burt show.
Which
Thursdays.
Are you going?
I'm going to Thursdays.
You're going
I'm
tomorrow.
going to see Indian City. And I think they made the lineup for my dad specifically.
Why?
Big Sky Diggers fan, huge Blue Rodeo fan. I grew up listening to Blue Rodeo because of him. So the two of them together and then plus Indian City, it's perfect.
Blue Rodeo always has had a huge following here in Winnipeg for many years.
Definitely.
They go back to when I was 18 years old, rocking out at Sunfest to them. Sky Diggers have that legendary story that follows them about from 1995, where the West End Cultural Center, they had a Sky Digger show there, and people partied so hard and were jumping up and down to the tunes.
Is that the band?
The Floor Broke.
Yes.
That's the band.
Okay, so I knew about that story. I didn't know what band caused such.
Yeah, maybe your
such a
dad was
ruckus.
there. You gotta ask.
I gotta ask.
Are you
Warren.
working Friday morning after that?
Yep.
Wow. All right. We'll bring in lots of coffee.
I'll tell you about the show. Bring
in lots of coffee for you. All right. What's going on in the weather today?
In the weather today, we are looking at some humidity across the province. Here in Winnipeg, partly cloudy, 18 degrees. Our forecasted high is 28, but with humidex feeling more like 33. In Brandon, Dauphin, Thompson today, we've got that humidity, but we also have the chance of some rain showers and thunderstorms this afternoon for those spots. I want to take some time for the commute, though. A few things going on right now. There is still a stall at Portage in Maine. If you're heading northbound, it is in the center lane. It really sneaks up on you, so keep left or right to pass. As well, southbound St. James approaching Silver, there is a stall blocking your southbound curb lane. Keep left to pass there. And then I got a call from Dennis about a really slow train that was crossing Marion and really backing traffic up. Dennis then called like 10 minutes later to say that the train had totally stopped, and so traffic was almost backed up to Lagimodiere. So if you want to maybe avoid that wait, it might be a good idea. Thank you, Dennis, for that call. And of course, if there's anything else getting in your way, you can let us know, or you can give us updates at 204-788-3093.
Well, as we've been already talking about, award-winning supergroup Indian City will play the Burt Block Party tomorrow. The local band's been nominated for numerous awards, including Juno nominations for their albums Here and Now in 2018 and Code Red in 2022. But also in 2022, the band's leader, Vince Fontaine, suddenly passed away. That thrust his daughter, Gabrielle Fontaine, into the role of lead vocals and guitar. I spoke with her yesterday, along with Jay Bodner, who's been with the band since 2018 and was previously with Eagle and Hawk.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
So nice to see you, Marcy.
So how are you feeling about playing the Burt Block Party? It's such a cool venue, right?
We are beyond stoked. As soon as we got the offer and it became official, we've spent much of the summer just being very excited and preparation and had to keep it a secret for a while, and which was really hard to do. And we're just beyond thrilled to be added to the bill, and especially on the night that Blue Rodeo's headlining.
Right?
Yeah.
You guys had that relationship then with Blue Rodeo, with Jim Cuddy played on Star People.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about the lineup? You got Blue Rodeo and Skydiggers on the Thursday night.
Well, we're so excited to see Jim because, he was good friends with my dad and Jay. They played the Juno Cup together. They won, they lost. Most of the time they would lose in the Juno Cup. No, it's so great because, the last album that my dad released before he passed, he really went big on it. He got some big guest artists. He had Chantal Kreviazek, he had Jim Cuddy. And I know that it would have been a dream of my dad's to play with Blue Rodeo, sharing the stage with them. And so for us, it's a bit bittersweet that he's not here, but we've just been so excited all summer about this gig.
I know my first Burt Block Party was last year. Have either of you been to attend them before, or are you this will be a first for you on stage, and off stage?
This is a first for me.
Cool.
So I'm so excited for this.
Yeah, how about you, Jay?
This will be the second for me.
Nice.
2 years ago, it did rain, so it all got moved indoors. So have not experienced the outdoor vibe yet.
I loved it last year. I'm going again this year as well. I just the vibe of it, and also being right central downtown Winnipeg. Yeah. What's it like for you guys to play with hometown crowds?
Oh, I love it. We're from Winnipeg, so it's important that we play to people from Winnipeg. We never want to forget where we come from. Winnipeg has such a great music scene, and it's really a collective, a nice, close group. So we're just so excited to play for everyone on Thursday.
I want to actually ask you about the music scene, because I was mentioning your dad's death, and I know that one of the legacies that for sure he left behind was mentoring talent, and always being mindful in that music scene of bringing out the new talent and such. What excites you about the music scene right now when you think about that and up and coming voices and musicians?
What I've been so excited about in the past couple of years is just seeing a rise of Indigenous artists finally being recognized for their worth. So for instance, the Junos, they have their Indigenous category, and typically Indigenous artists were always put in there, but lately we've been seeing them expand out into, alternative category, singer-songwriter, and we saw William Prince, Ace Sonaby. They've been winning these categories. They've been taking up space in places that we should have been taking up space a long time ago. So it's really great to see other Indigenous artists thriving, because for me, whenever I see another Indigenous artist succeed, that's a success for all of us.
Truth and reconciliation, through the music that you guys make in Indian City has always been part of the value of the songs and making the music. How important is that as a value for the group?
I would even suggest going back to Eagle and Hawk. I think Gabrielle's dad, Vince, was a leader and saw the value of Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists together creating music. So for us, that is what we continue to do. We've had a couple non-Indigenous guest artists on this record. We've picked up a new up-and-coming theater star to Julia Davis to join us on stage. My son, Jace Bodner, who's got his own burgeoning, thriving...
His own vibe.
He's sitting in with us. So I think we see it as a value, not just from the music lens, but also from the interpersonal to exist together and commonalities, because whether you subscribe to a specific spirituality, religion, or culture, like there's just so much human element crossover between all peoples, and we really value that.
This album, the new album you're referring to, is Tomorrow, it's called, right?
Yep.
So we're about to play a tune from the album, and it is called The Best. What do you love about it, and what's it been like working on the new album?
Oh, since my dad passed, I knew I didn't want his music to die with him, so it was so important that we continued the band, and with that continued writing new music. And I think what's great about this album is a lot of it did come from me, and I learned from my dad, so you can actually see my dad in the lyrics and the melodies of this song, all the songs and everything with the album. But what's also been different is me and Jay have had this new relationship of writing songs together, and we've really gotten into a good click when it comes to, you know, working through songs together. A lot of the time, one of us will bring a song forward, but it's not yet complete, so we want to work together to make it the best that it can be.
Do you feel Vince in the room? Do you feel the familial vibe?
There are some Vince elements of her which are totally beautiful. She's very easy to work with, to influence just through my old man experience with her youthful exuberance and trying to find the common ground with that, and obviously giving her space to create and
sorry, I shouldn't be finishing your
sentence. No, thank you for that. I appreciate that. To create and to step up as the leader that she has grown into.
Having been at last year's block party, just getting back to Thursday night, I know sometimes there's these final numbers with all the groups. Do you guys and the Sky Diggers and Blue Rodeo have anything planned?
I'm just going to say it's just you'll have to be there. It is exciting.
It is.
There was some text messages with the other groups that went by, but
stay to the end.
Stay to the end. Okay. I would suggest you stay to the end.
I like that.
I would also suggest you make sure you come for our show because there's also a very sweet surprise there as well. Do you want to just say it?
Yeah, we've kind of been hinting at it already, but you know, we have the song Star People with Jim Cuddy, and Jim's gonna be there, so maybe
he's gonna be there early in the night to sing with you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we're so excited for it.
Well, I hope you don't crack the stage, because I think it was the Sky Diggers at the Weston Cultural Center in '95 that broke the stage, wasn't it? Now I'm putting my old lady hat on.
Well, you and me. I wonder if it's possible to give away 2 tickets to a lucky CBC listener.
Do we have 2 tickets to give away?
We sure do.
Yes. What year was Indian City nominated for its first Juno Award?
That's an excellent question.
Do you like that?
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that. Thank you guys both. Enjoy the show.
Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
us.
Gabrielle Fontaine and Jay Bodner from the band Indian City. They joined us in studio yesterday, surprised us with those tickets. The group's playing the Burt Block Party tomorrow with the Sky Diggers and headliners Blue Rodeo. So if you want to win the pair of tickets, here's the question once again. You can you tell us what year Indian City was nominated for its first Juno Award. That's the question. What year was Indian City nominated for its first Juno Award? Email the answer to win@cbc.ca. We're not going to take calls. We're just going to get emails. So win@cbc.ca with the answer, along with your name and phone number. We're going to choose a random winner out of all the correct responses at the end of today's show. So you've got 15 minutes, folks. If you're listening and you want to go to the Burt Block Party tomorrow night, answer this. What year was Indian City nominated for its first Juno Award? Win@cbc.ca. By the way, the Block Party runs through Sunday outside the Burton Cummings Theatre in downtown Winnipeg. And you heard Gabrielle in the interview there talking about this tune. So this is one of their latest, Indian City and the Best.
I used to skate like Mario Lemieux. Had the park on a string. You should see the things I do. But now not so much.
I used to know every word to songs on the radio. Vanilla Ice and Scary Spice cranked on my stereo. But now, not so much.
But there's still some things some things that I'm pretty great at. Yeah, I can safely say I ain't bragging when I say that. When it comes to loving you, you can put me to the test. When it comes to loving you, I'm easily the best. When it comes to loving you, you can put me to the test. When it comes to loving you, I'm easily the best.
Well, if you're a sucker for a good banjo and some good harmonies, that's your tune. The Best from Indian City. That's from their new album called Tomorrow. They will perform tomorrow at the Burt Block Party in downtown Winnipeg.
The CBC Music Top 20. CBC Music Live. All right. Savor the flavor of the Francophone world on C'est Formidable. Experience the next wave of Indigenous music with Reclaim. The global sounds of frequencies. End your day or start your late night with music on CBC Radio 1. Weeknights at 11, 11:30 in Newfoundland, and on demand on CBC Listen.
It is 8:26 a.m. and Lori Hoostratton has popped into the studio. She's once again hosting Radio Noon today in the Call-In Conversation. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what are you guys talking about today?
Well, back to school looms. I'm sorry to bring that possibly bad news to people, and that means prepping lunches and meals are going to be
lunch.
Lunch is going to be part of a lot of people's daily schedule, getting that happening. So I was just thinking back to when I was a kid, and I think I took a tuna sandwich to school for 12 years. That was all my mother was up to, and none
That's
of
all
us.
she had.
Yes,
the tuna sandwich.
That's it. And get out of the kitchen. It's early, So somehow getting kids to have a love of food instilled in them, so that they want to participate in their lunch making and future nutrition. We're going to have a food writer and cookbook writer who we've heard a lot on CBC, Julie Van Rosendahl. She will join us to give you some suggestions and how to get your kids involved in this. How successful do you think this normally is?
Because that's how you get them to eat and not.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate saying this out loud, but we all know what happens. People throw the sandwich out. It still happens.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, it's like your heart stops. It's like throwing out food. But how do you get kids to eat and get involved? And if they're involved, then they're more likely to eat their lunch, of course, is the theory, right?
Well, I think that's true. When you've put some effort into it and it's something that you like to eat and you've helped your mother in the calm atmosphere of home before school to get your lunch together. So we're going to work on that for everybody. So give us a call today at 204-780-0893 or
788-3797. So the live line is what Lori was giving between 12:30 and 1. But we always like to have Lori pop in and whoever's hosting on Radio Noon, just so you can leave a message now in case lunch is busy for you today.
Lunch, yum. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Lori. 788-3797 to leave a message if you have questions or if you have tips to pass along. This is a conversation that goes both ways. How do you get your kids to participate in making those back-to-school lunches so they're more successful? Let's get into what's happening here, not in weather, but actually in traffic. It's become a little bit busy here. Chloe?
Yeah, we are looking at a stall in Portage and Main, northbound in the center lane. It really sneaks up on you, so keep left or right to pass. As well, southbound St. James approaching Silver, there's a stall blocking your southbound curb lane. Keep left to pass there. You could still see backed up traffic just on Marion there due to a very slow and then stopped train on Marion. Last we heard, things were backed up to Lagimodiere, so pretty slow moving. And then lastly, I got a call from Jason, who travels by bike, says he noticed a lot more cyclists out there, which is some good news. But mentioned to avoid Wolseley. There's lots of construction going on right now in that area, especially for cyclists.
All right, thanks, Chloe. 788-3093. Still time if you have something that should be passed along to others by the end of the show. That's our commuter line. Well, today in The Current, which follows our show at 8:37, with the Ontario Conservatives now supporting wind and solar energy, guest host Connie Walker has a panel that's going to examine what Green Conservatives can bring to the political table. So you can stay tuned for that conversation. But right now it's time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. At 8:30, it's mostly cloudy and 21 degrees in Thompson, 18 degrees and mostly cloudy over downtown Winnipeg. Good morning, I'm Matt Humphrey. We have a silver alert this morning. Winnipeg police say 69-year-old Alan Hunter was last seen in the Transcona area yesterday afternoon. He's 5'8", with a thin build, gray hair and blue eyes. When he went missing, he was possibly wearing a blue plaid shirt and blue jeans, and you can see Hunter's photo at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Norway House Cree Nation is trying to find the dogs involved in attacking a little girl. 9-year-old Heavenly Monius was badly bitten last Thursday on her cheek, her chest, and her arm. She was medevaced to Winnipeg and is recovering in hospital. Dion Clark is a counselor in the community. He says as many as 10 dogs may have been involved.
And even for the dogs that were involved with this incident, we don't know who the dog owners are. I've put it on Facebook trying to find out who the dog owners are, and nobody's sharing that information. And when we went around to try to find the dogs, all of a sudden there's no dogs around.
Clark says the community has been working on a new animal control bylaw. The new rules may require pet owners to register their animals and keep them on leashes or face fines. Manitoba's NDP government plans to allow municipalities to opt out of the Winnipeg region and no longer take part in a new regional planning framework dubbed Plan 2050. No fewer than 5 of the municipalities around the city wanted the province to change or scrap the plan entirely. Canoe says the former Progressive Conservative government imposed the plan upon them, and he says his government will introduce legislation this fall making involvement voluntary.
Basically, this is something that was forced by Pallister and Stephenson. This is a Pallister-Stephenson special. So we're going to bring freedom back to the equation.
The current PC opposition wanted the NDP government to delay the plan. Winnipeg's mayor says more coordination is still needed to prevent a patchwork of rules across the capital region. The existing hodgepodge, he says, is bad for business. The University of Manitoba is suing its former law dean for nearly $700,000 in unauthorized spending. The lawsuit filed in Manitoba's Court of King's Bench last week says Jonathan Blackbranch misspent funds on professional development courses, members-only clubs, and personal expenses between 2016 and 2020. Blackbranch was disbarred from the Manitoba Law Society back in February, and multiple attempts by CBC to contact Blackbranch have been unsuccessful, and none of the allegations have been proven in court. In international news, Canada's International Development Minister is in Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, pledging nearly $6 million in humanitarian assistance. It comes as Russia says Ukraine launched its biggest drone attack yet on Moscow. Julia Chapman has your details.
Moscow's mayor Sergei Sobyanin says 11 drones were aimed at the Russian capital. Several of them were shot down over the city of Podolsk, less than 40 kilometers from the Kremlin. No injuries or serious damage have been reported. Ukraine has not acknowledged the attack, but most of Ukraine's counterattacks are focused on border regions. Ukraine's army chief Alexander Syrsky says his forces control more than 1,200 square kilometers of Russian territory in Kursk, including 93 settlements. Ukraine's Air Force says it also repelled a major Russian attack overnight. It says 50 of 69 drones launched by Moscow were intercepted, as was a cruise missile. 2 ballistic missiles, however, got through. It's not yet clear where they landed. Julia Chapman, CBC News, London.
And finally, in Kenora, the cat shelter is asking for help as it struggles with overcrowding. The shelter declared a state of emergency on Sunday, saying it has nearly 120 cats in shelter or with fosters and more than 80 cats on a waiting list. Lisa Lyle is the shelter's volunteer coordinator. She says this summer has been particularly challenging.
We have been at max capacity literally, close to the time that I started volunteering there, which was about a year ago. But it has gotten extremely bad over the summer, and we have a lack of volunteers and a lack of funding and no room at the inn.
Lyle says the shelter's in need of donations, more volunteers and fosters. The shelter's having an open house on August 31st, which will include a fundraising, barbecue, and book sale, and a chance for people to meet and socialize with all of the furry felines. There might be some hairless cats as well. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg. I don't know.
But they don't socialize a lot. They're more serious. So.
Yeah. I don't know.
My husband wanted a hairless cat so bad.
I want a hairless cat.
Do you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, kindred spirit there. So.
Yeah, they're adorable.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for the morning, Marcy.
You as well. That's Matt Humphrey in our news department this morning. So let's have a look at traffic actually right now because Chloe's back in with that big list.
You know what? The list is significantly shorter, Marcy. Two of those stalls have been cleared. Southbound St. James approaching Silver, all lanes open for traffic now. And then northbound Main and Portage, all lanes also open for traffic. So some great news. We're looking at a mix of sun and cloud today in Winnipeg. Wind south 30, gusting to 50, a high of 28. We're about 10 degrees away from that right now, 18 currently. And with humidex feeling like 33. So it's definitely going to warm up out there.
All right, Chloe, thank you.
No problem.
Chloe Friesen, as well as Brad Lillies and Sierra Sanders and Marshall Hodgins, all working on our live show this morning, as well in our news department, Joni Nicolo, and as you heard, Matt Humphrey. Big thanks to our associate producers who work in our unit here at Current Affairs Manitoba, Current Affairs at CBC Manitoba, and our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez, Wendy Parker, acting yesterday in producer role, and Leif Larson, who's the senior producer of audio here at CBC locally. Thank you, everyone. Big thanks to you for listening. We are here for you and with you every morning, and we hope you join us again tomorrow. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC and The Currents. Coming up next. Stay with us.